dull and gloomy across the Midlands, East and South East England. Brighter for the north of Scotland, Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and the South West, with some decent sunshine by the end of the day.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Thursday, the 30th of January. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Tragedy in the sky. Just miles from the White House, an American Airlines flight collides mid-air into a helicopter, seconds from landing. 67 people on board as a major rescue operation now gets underway.
An active operation that's going to last many hours as we continue to work through recovery efforts and rescue operations.
Hope is fading quickly. Challenging conditions, freezing cold temperatures are disrupting rescuers as families share their devastation and still some hope.
I'm just praying that somebody's pulling her out of the river right now as we speak. That's all I can pray for. I'm just praying to God.
When was the last time you spoke to her?
She texted me that they were landing in 20 minutes.
Well, questions now have to turn to how this could have happened as the CEO of American Airlines speaks out on the tragedy.
This is a difficult day for all of us at American Airlines, and our efforts now are focused entirely on the needs of our passengers, crew members, partners, first responders, along with their families and loved ones.
Terrible. Also coming up, a GB News exclusive. Mark White joins an immigration raid to find out just how many migrants are exploiting an EU loophole to enter Britain illegally.
What visa have you got? Work visa?
For 6 months, yeah.
6 months. Visit visa?
Yes.
Okay, right. You're not allowed to work with that, okay? So at the moment, okay, you're under arrest.
Well, the small boats are the very visible manifestation of the migrant crisis, but the vast majority of those arriving to work here illegally come unnoticed on planes and on ferries.
Live this hour, Labour grandees, government ministers and members of Parliament are gathering for the funeral of the former Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott. We're expecting readings and eulogies from Tony Blair, Gordon Brown and the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
And in other news, crime on the rise, a surge in shoplifting, a shocking surge, with 2,000 incidents a day now being reported. Businesses are crying out for help. We'll be joined by a man who was punched in the face trying to stop a suspected crook.
Well, there's a lot to get through today, but happening now, the funeral of John Prescott, of course, Deputy Prime Minister throughout those new Labour years of government. Let's see if we can return to some of those live pictures at Hull Minster, where so many of the great and the good from the Labour Party are gathering to honour the former Deputy Prime Minister.
You can hear the bagpipes playing there. Of course, John Prescott, hard to overstate just how much of an influential figure he's been in British politics. One of the biggest titans of politics, particularly the New Labour movement.
Absolutely, and that glue that held the sort of shiny, middle-class Blairism to the traditional working-class trade union base of the Labour Party. Alistair Campbell there, playing bagpipes. I'm not sure how many people would have expected that. The former spinner in number 10 for many years in those early New Labour years, playing the bagpipes as the coffin of John Prescott is walked through the Minster there.
His daughter often comments that Alistair Campbell always gets the bagpipes out whenever he can. He absolutely loves playing that instrument.
Well, what a poignant moment there. Some of the biggest figures that we'll all recognise from the early 2000s. But my goodness me, thinking back on the figure of John Prescott, what a character. We'll all remember the 2001 general election when some protester tried to sock a punch to John Prescott, and he wasn't having that. He quickly returned the favour. The Prime Minister at the time, Tony Blair's response to that after crisis meetings, what did he tell the media? John is John.
I think everyone will remember that that incident, one of the most memorable moments of his life, possibly. We're going to bring you more on this. We'll be hearing from Tony Blair, most likely, Gordon Brown as well, and Keir Starmer is apparently also going to be giving a reading there too, so the titans of Labour politics.
Absolutely, but all of that to come and so much more after your latest news headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. Our headlines. Dozens of people are feared dead after a passenger plane crashed into the Potomac River after colliding with a US Army helicopter in Washington, D.C. The latest live shots here from the US Capitol, where dawn has broken. It's just after 7 a.m. Rescue efforts, as you can see, ongoing. 64 people on board the American Airlines flight with 3 soldiers on the Black Hawk helicopter. At least 30 bodies have already been recovered, and hopes are fading fast of finding any survivors. Well, this is the plane coming into land at the airport seconds before the collision. The helicopter itself was on a training flight when it happened just before 9 p.m. local time. This is the first major US commercial air crash since 2009. The mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, says their thoughts are with the families of those involved in the crash.
So certainly I speak for the people of Washington, 700,000 of us who are extremely sorry for the families who are experiencing loss tonight. And so we want you to know that we will continue to work with American Airlines to share information as frequently as possible and make sure that we're getting accurate information.
3 Israeli hostages and 5 Thai nationals held in Gaza have been released by Hamas. The first of those to be freed was the 20-year-old Agam Berger, a female soldier who was handed over to the Red Cross by Hamas in Jabalia in northern Gaza earlier, surrounded by fighters. She was then transferred to the Israeli military at the border. Some impressive pictures here from a drone shows some of the destruction of the buildings in northern Gaza in Jabalia. The Red Cross vehicles there taking her to the IDF. And in the last few minutes, the Israeli military says a further 7 hostages have been handed over, and that includes Arbel Yehud, a civilian on the left of your screen, and another civilian, the 80-year-old Gadi Moses, on the right. They are making their way to Israeli forces in the Gaza Strip before going to the border. The scene at the border of Gaza and Israel, where those helicopters await the hostages. They will then take them to a hospital in Tel Aviv. The Thai hostages haven't been named. Now, their release unilaterally a move by Hamas. That's not part of the official ceasefire deal. 110 Palestinians are due to be freed from Israeli jails in exchange. They will be released to Ramallah in the occupied West Bank a little bit later. Water bills are set to rise in England and Wales by an average of £123 per household from April. It means a typical bill will rise by 26%, so from £480 per year to £603. The industry body, Water UK, says the extra money will fund infrastructure projects and help struggling customers. However, consumer groups fear the rise will mean more households fall into debt. 44% of parents in a survey think children should know how to use books correctly before starting primary school, with some instead trying to swipe as if using a tablet. A very low figure. Only 3 in 4 parents think children should be toilet trained before starting reception. That's according to a poll for the early years charity Kindred Squared. It found that teachers believe children are entering primary school with delays in basic motor skills and a lack of core strength because of excessive screen time. And the survey also found a huge disparity between when teachers and parents consider those children to be school ready. And as you were hearing a moment ago, the funeral of John Prescott, the former Labour Deputy Prime Minister, is underway at Hull Minster. These live pictures where Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, is delivering a speech, a eulogy. The funeral cortege arrived a while ago. Prescott, of course, a major figure in British politics, a former union activist. He served in Blair and Gordon Brown's government. Let's listen into Gordon Brown.
Personal recollections, and etched indelibly in my memory, and maybe in yours too, is 1996 and 1997. When I was one of many travelling in support of Tony round the country with John. I remember John everywhere we went, pulling out this card. You will remember it too. He waved it above his head, the placard, unforgettable. He said he always had to carry it with him in case he forgot one of the pledges and would be criticised by Tony. Remember too that bus that drove miles and miles, more places than any campaign vehicle in memory. And as John joked on polling day, the bus would still be on call to take to the airport all those Tories who had promised to leave the country if Labour achieved power. Remember too that phrase he coined and kept repeating, traditional values in a modern setting, and always with that socialist message as if engraved on his soul, for the many and not the few. Unforgettable. And remember also not only the emotional power and the drama of the great speech that saved John Smith's leadership. Unforgettable. But remember especially today, John and Pauline together. That most glamorous couple. I want us to thank Pauline today for her charm, for her elegance, for her dignity, for her wisdom, for her partnership with and in support of John, right through from his seafaring and student days and across 63 years of marriage. Pauline, we thank you for everything that you have done. And remember too, as unforgettable, John's quick wit and his humour. Like his speech to the CUC, always a difficult audience, when John announced that he would be followed by his friend Peter Mandelson. It's a sort of charm offensive, he said. I'll leave you to work out who's charming and who's offensive. And remember too his famous put-downs in Parliament, his Tory opposite number, John Redwood, with this cutting opening line. It's well known that of all the trees, the redwood is the thickest. Now, in the first act of Hamlet, Shakespeare has words that should ring out today. He was a man, take him for all in all. I shall not look upon his like again. And that is John. We will never see his like again. A man of the people he certainly was, in a class by himself, a one-off, one-of-a-kind, but one of us in the best sense of the word. Unique, remarkable, extraordinary. John Lennon would have called him a working-class hero, and not least because he risked appearing on Gavin and Stacey, seen by millions as Ness's rejected suitor. John was a man of the people because he could connect with people, and I don't just mean that man in Rill who dared to hurl an egg at him. John could connect with people who had not only encountered him in the media, but knew he was on their side. And the John you saw in Hull and the John you saw at home was the John you saw in Downing Street. And the reason is he was never afraid to stand up for what he believed and for the people it was his life's work to serve. And John's achievements are not just what he said. John should be remembered far more for what he did. John would have been too modest to list all his successes, and it's good that David and then Tony will say so much more about them. But perhaps no one can perhaps capture in one eulogy the full range of John's qualities: determination, hard work, passion, belief, principle, courage, perseverance. That's what made him a man of action and not of words. Now, some write about the former boxer who, as a trade unionist, understood the importance of unity and solidarity because he became key to holding the ring within Labour. And yes, John was keeping the show on the road during difficult times. But John, I know, would want to be remembered more for the 1.5 million houses modernised under his leadership.
Well, we've been listening there to former Prime Minister, former Chancellor Gordon Brown, delivering a eulogy at the funeral of John Prescott. But elsewhere today, tragedy this morning in Washington, D.C., just miles away from the White House.
These images here show a passenger jet with 64 people on board colliding with a US Army helicopter before crashing into the Potomac River. Now, local news reports are now reporting that 30 bodies have been recovered from the river. Coast Guard, police divers and ambulance units remain at the scene. Now, posting to Truth Social, Donald Trump's social media platform, he says, "This is a bad situation that looks like it should have been prevented. Not good!" Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. These are live pictures we're seeing of the area now. Tom Harwood, Tom, is going to show us just how close this is to some of the main points in Washington, Tom.
That's right. Let's start zooming out and look at the continental United States. We can see New York up here, Washington, D.C. just here, up Chesapeake Bay, round the Potomac River. And if we zoom in to Washington, D.C., we'll be able to see in greater detail what is now called the Ronald Reagan National Airport. It used to be called Washington National Airport until the last couple of decades, but the crash that we're talking about happened just here in the Potomac River, and this is significant. This is significant because it's only a very short distance from just up here. This is the Pentagon. the head, the centre of security in the United States of America, itself the site of a tragic plane crash, of course, on 9/11, when one of the 3 planes that crashed into buildings hit the Pentagon, which is just here. Now, it's also very, very close to the White House. The crash, again, down here. The White House just here. This is the National Mall in Washington, D.C. The White House just here, just the other side of the river. Other famous landmarks will know the top of Capitol Hill here. This is the Capitol building, where the inauguration of Donald Trump took place just a week or 2 ago. The other end of the National Mall, the Lincoln Memorial, where Martin Luther King delivered his famous march for peace, prosperity, jobs, and everything else in the 1960s. But again, this is just showing just how close from these national monuments, the Washington Monument here in the middle of the Mall, just very, very close here to where this crash was. The Ronald Reagan National Airport here, this should be the most secure airspace pretty much anywhere in the world. This is the heart of government for the most powerful country, the richest country, the most technologically developed country on the face of the planet. How did a military helicopter crash an American Airlines flight in this river?
That's a very good question, Tom, and it's a question that the President of the United States is asking this morning as well. Joining us now in the studio is travel editor of the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday, Mark Palmer. Mark, the question on everyone's lips is that question, how on earth could this have happened? What do we know?
Well, I think, first of all, the thing to say that the shockwaves that are going through the whole world of aviation at the moment is quite unprecedented in many ways, because, as you were saying, the potential danger of this in such a built-up area. It's also an astonishing event because it's something that happens so rarely. I mean, the last time that a commercial aircraft was involved in this sort of thing was 16 years ago in America. So, and as you were saying, that it's heavily policed, that area, in the sense that you've got the presidential airspace, you've got commercial airspace, but it's also one of the busiest, and you've got the potential, therefore, for something if something catastrophically goes wrong, then obviously that's what we've witnessed today.
And the fact that it is so guarded, I suppose, with these different airspaces, with planes forbidden from going in particular parts of the city, the incline to this particular airport for flights is very, very steep. They can't have as shallow a landing curve as in many airports because of all of these preclusions. Could this have played a part?
That's right. And an airline of this kind, not the biggest of airline, but has to bank quite severely in order to get into the right position to land.
It is quite extraordinary what the death toll might turn out to be. It does appear as though there's little hope that anyone can be rescued, considering not least the freezing temperatures in that river. We know just how cold it's been in Washington recently. Just how do they go about these types of rescue operations?
Well, I mean, we are, as you say, we're in a search and rescue situation, and one reads reports that the weather being such that it is, that somebody can't survive for much longer than 10 or 15 minutes, if that. And so it's going to be a gruesome few hours. With relatives obviously deeply anxious, but obviously fearing the worst. I think it's important to say that in terms of the black box, one black box has been found. I think there's some reports that the other has also been found. And it could take up to 2 years until we know exactly what has happened, which is obviously a very long time. But we should be clearer in a few weeks, I would have thought. There is something called this traffic collision avoidance system, which every commercial airplane has. And when it comes when there is another plane nearby, it starts to change colour and starts to flash. The problem here, I think, is that it fails to work once you get beneath, I think it's 400 or 300 feet. And there's indication here that perhaps that nothing did flash up. But even if it had, at that point, what could have been done if this helicopter was on what is now, we know, a collision course with this aircraft?
No, it's just the most tragic situation. As we can see live in Washington, D.C. now, the sun is rising. One of the issues with the search and rescue operation over the course of the last 8 or so hours has been it's been pitch black. And it's obviously so much harder to see precisely what has gone in while the sun has been set. Perhaps we will see more in the coming minutes and indeed hours as the sun rises.
And I think you're right that not only is this hindering the rescue operation, but at the time of the crash, the fact that it was nighttime, it was dark, there was loads of lights going on. Pilots are saying it's very difficult to see, visually to see another plane or a helicopter. There's just a series of lights because it's so busy. You've got the lights on the ground, you've got lights in the air, making it very, very difficult.
Well, Mark Palmer, thank you so much for being with us, for talking through what is the most extraordinary situation in Washington, D.C. Mark Palmer, appreciate your time.
Yes, we'll bring you any more updates as and when we get them. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show, though. A GB News exclusive to bring you. Mark White joins an immigration raid to find out just how many migrants are exploiting an EU loophole to enter Britain illegally.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Have you noticed that more and more stores are closing? Well, last year, apparently 13,000 stores closed for the last time on the high street.
Well, experts warn the worst is still to come for our small businesses.
Well, let's talk to retail expert Jeremy Baker. Good morning to you, Jeremy. How bad is it and what can be done?
Well, nothing can be done about it. Retail is like that. It's a boom and bust operation. So last year, let's say you had a shop and it was booming. This year, the consumer can just change their mind. They don't need to come back to your shop ever again.
Well, it is sad, Jeremy, because our high streets are the beating heart of our communities, aren't they? And for many people, I know I can relate to my high street, it is such a depressing sight, walking down there and seeing them all boarded up and closed down.
But how often do you walk down that boarded up high street? I think people move on to something else. The online world is very big, and lots of other things are very exciting. And so people, you know, the shop. I like to go to my GP in a shopping centre and get my tests done there rather than tramp off all the way to the GP, for example. And children could go to little schools in the high street. I've seen that happen already. So lots of things could happen to the high street. It could be much more a social centre, much more kind of like pubs, coffee shops, all that. Charities. I don't see anything wrong with charities taking over. But the idea of the shop-centred high street, finished, that's gone. Never coming back. Goodbye. It's not sad, it's just life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
OK, 12:25 is the time. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, increasing numbers of EU nationals are abusing the common travel arrangement with Ireland to enter and work in the UK illegally. GB News can reveal today.
Yes, many Romanians and Bulgarians in particular are avoiding border checks by crossing from the Republic into the UK, with others simply arriving on tourist visas and then finding work.
Well, our Home and Security editor Mark White was given exclusive access to accompany immigration enforcement teams who've increased the number of raids they carry out by a third since Labour came to power.
Under the cover of darkness, immigration officers and police move into this large agricultural business in North Wales.
No one up there?
No, I'm in touch.
They're on the hunt for immigrants working here illegally. And it doesn't take long to find their first suspect.
On you now.
The man they've detained is a Romanian national.
What's your permission to be in the UK? You got a visa to come to the UK?
For several years after Brexit, EU citizens enjoyed a grace period when authorities didn't prosecute those working here unlawfully. But now, if they breach the rules, they're treated like any other illegal immigrant.
What visa have you got? Work visa?
For 6 months, yeah.
6 months. Visit visa?
Yes.
Okay, right. You're not allowed to work with that, okay? So at the moment, okay, you're under arrest, okay? For breaching the conditions of your leave to remain in the UK. Do you understand?
As fellow officers search for other suspects, the Romanian has walked back to his accommodation on the site for further checks.
Anybody else in your caravan?
Inside a cluster of caravans, more suspects, all Romanian, are being questioned.
Where is your passport?
Officers told me they see very significant numbers of Romanians and Bulgarians in particular abusing UK immigration rules to work here illegally. An increasingly popular means of arrival is through the common travel arrangement with Ireland, and some of those detained here may well have come through that route.
We've got individuals that we've got a trace of them exiting the country. We've got no trace of them coming into the country. So we haven't bottomed that out yet, but what we found in the past is that they will have come through Ireland and then through the common travel area, you know, avoiding the controls.
In nearby offices, another group of Romanians are being questioned. Although the Home Office was unable to provide us with a detailed breakdown of the number of EU nationals arrested on immigration offences over the past year, this enforcement team told me it's definitely on the rise, and many are coming through Ireland.
Not just the EA nationals that are going through Ireland, it's other foreign nationals, because it can be like the back door into the UK. So you've got the small boats where people are coming in illegally. You've got other clandestine that are coming in the back of lorry, but obviously there's the abuse of the CTA as well.
Many others are simply arriving on tourist visas and then finding employment in breach of the law. As officers question the suspects with the help of interpreters over the phone, it quickly becomes apparent why some are willing to take the risk.
Okay, so how much do you get paid?
1,000 a week.
£1,000 per week.
For those employing illegal workers, these enforcement raids can be very costly indeed, with fines of up to £45,000 per illegal worker. Yet right across the country, thousands of employers continue to flout the law. Since Labour came to power, immigration enforcement raids have increased by more than a third over the same period the year before. But despite more than 3,000 arrests over the past 6 months, it's still only a tiny fraction of the number of illegal immigrants here, with unofficial estimates putting that figure at more than 1.5 million. Mark White, GB News, North Wales.
Just astonishing, isn't it? Mark White's here in the studio with us, who obviously made this report and was there. Just the lengths people will go to enter this country illegally, it's just non-stop.
Well, indeed, and of course we talk an awful lot about the small boats because that is the very visible manifestation of the migrant crisis. But the fact is, the vast majority of those who are coming here from overseas that want to work illegally in this country are coming by more mundane means. They're coming on planes, they're coming over on ferries, they're arriving here on tourist visas, student visas, overstaying visas. Many European Union citizens, we're now told, are arriving in Ireland, again by plane or ferry or whatever. And if they're EU citizens, of course they can travel to Ireland, no problem at all. We don't have a border because of the understandable political hot potato that would be, and what was agreed after Brexit. There would be no hard border, despite this, of course, being the border to the European Union now. And that means that people can come over that border unchecked. And that's exactly what they're doing. Not Germans or necessarily French and people like that from those countries, probably described as more affluent European countries. But Eastern European countries like Romania and Bulgaria in particular are using that avenue into the UK.
And this can be quite beneficial for these individuals. I was surprised to hear in your piece there that at least one of these illegal migrants was earning £1,000 a week.
Yeah, well, we hear a narrative from the government, and to be fair, we also heard this narrative to an extent from the previous Conservative government as well, about the poor migrant, they're being exploited, they're living in squalid conditions. Now, I think that is true for some, but for many, they're making lots of money. Now, that guy on £1,000 a week, well, that's £50,000 a year, not paying tax, of course, and living on site for free, a bunch of caravans on that site. He had his wife and his child with him as well. So no doubt making many, many more times more in a salary than he would if he was back in Romania. They make their money, they take the cash, and then eventually they may well go back to Romania with an embarrassment of riches as far as they're concerned.
I mean, this is the thing. We have agricultural visas available to people. You can apply through the correct channels, but this way, so much cheaper for the employer, and of course, no taxes to pay for the illegal migrants. There you go. It's a win-win for them, isn't it, until they get caught by an immigration raid. Mark, we're going to have to leave it there, but we'll come back to you a little later on in the show because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to illegal migration. But
certainly is. But this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come. We're expecting a live press conference from the Mayor of Washington, D.C. We can see the podium is being prepared there. We're going to be live at that press conference after your latest news headlines.
Hello there, very good afternoon to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Our headlines: a search and rescue operation is underway with dozens feared dead in Washington, D.C. after a passenger plane crashed into the Potomac River after colliding with a US Army helicopter. And the latest live shots from the US Capitol, where it is now 7:30 in the morning and more than 300 emergency responders have been searching for survivors. Hope is clearly fading in cold and icy conditions. There in the US Capitol, 64 people were on board the flight. 3 soldiers were on the Black Hawk helicopter. More than 30 bodies have now been recovered, and those efforts are ongoing. More as soon as we get it here on GB News. Meanwhile, 3 Israeli hostages and 5 Thai nationals held in Gaza have now been released by Hamas and are back in Israel. 20-year-old Agam Berger was the first to be freed. She's a female soldier, and she was handed over to the Red Cross in northern Gaza earlier. These pictures from Jabalia, plenty of Hamas fighters in the picture. She was then transferred to the Israeli military at the border and no doubt is in hospital and will be reunited with her family soon. A short time ago, the Israeli military also confirmed 7 more hostages have now been handed over to the Red Cross, and that includes 5 unnamed Thai nationals. Their release, not a part of the official ceasefire deal, so that's unilateral from Hamas. It also includes Arbel Yehud on the left of your picture and Gadi Moses on the right, both civilians, and they have been released and they're making their way to IDF forces in the Gaza Strip before going to the border. Let's bring you some live pictures then from Tel Aviv in Israel, where families of those held captive well, no, in fact, we can go to a live presser and bring you some details from Washington, D.C.
Last night. I'm joined by U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, D.C. Fire and EMS Chief John Donnelly, American Airlines CEO Robert Eisen, the MWA, the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority CEO Jack Carter, United States Senator Mark Warner, United States Senator Tim Kaine, U.S. Representative Don Beyer, as well as the Chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, Pamela Smith. And we are joined by first responders from across the Metropolitan Washington region.
I speak for all of us when I say, and certainly all Washingtonians, how very sad we are for American Airlines, for the United States Department of Defense, and for all Americans for the loss of life that happened with the collision of these aircrafts. We know that includes families from across our region as well as in Kansas and across the country. This morning we all share in a profound sense of grief. I do want to thank the first responders who acted quickly last night, who ran towards danger, went into a very frigid river, and have worked throughout the night. Chief Donnelly reported in last night's briefing that we have a strong mutual aid agreement in our region, and those teams have worked together throughout the night in really tough and heartbreaking conditions, and we should all thank them for their heroic efforts. So we'll have several updates today. I'm first going to turn to the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, and then you will hear directly from Chief John Donnelly with a situational update.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, Sean Duffy here, Secretary of Transportation. We wish we were gathering for different purposes today. I just want to let you know that the Department of Transportation, the FAA, along with the White House, President Trump, local, state, and federal partners all working together on this incident in unison. I couldn't be prouder of this team that's been assembled, working tirelessly. Mayor, I want to thank you specifically for your work. A few details I'd like to give all of you, and some of you reported this, but last night, if you live in the D.C. area, you would know that this was a clear night last night. The helicopter was in a standard pattern. If you live in the D.C. area, you'll see helicopters up and down the river. This flight pattern is seen oftentimes when you live in D.C. This was a standard flight pattern last night as well. The American airline flight coming into land was in a standard flight pattern as it was coming into DCA. So this was not unusual with a military aircraft flying the river and aircraft landing at DCA. And again, if you live in the area, you'll see that frequently with those two aircraft working together. As many of you reported, we have located the two aircrafts. The fuselage of the American airline plane was inverted. It's been located in 3 different sections. It's in about waist-deep water, so that recovery is going to go on today as that recovery takes place of the fuselage of the aircraft. NTSB is going to start to analyze that aircraft, partner with the FAA with all of the information we have to get the best results possible for the American people. I would just say that safety is our expectation. Everyone who flies in American skies expects that we fly safely, that when you depart an airport, you get to your destination. That didn't happen last night. And I know that President Trump, his administration, the FAA, the DOT, we will not rest until we have answers for the families and for the flying public. You should be assured that when you fly, you're safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Mayor. I'm joined today with Fire Chief Bonnet from the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, and I'm John Donnelly, Chief of the District of Columbia Fire and EMS Department. Last night at 8:48, the control tower sounded an alert, which alerts responders to respond to a report of an aircraft crash on or near the airport. That sets off an immediate response from the Airport Authority Fire Department, from the District of Columbia and Metropolitan Harbor Patrol fireboats and other fireboats on the river in order to support that type of operation. Very quickly, this call escalated. It became apparent, the responders realized that they had a plane crash and immediately escalated to a response that ultimately included about 300 people last night. These responders found extremely frigid conditions. They found heavy wind, they found ice on the water, and they're operated all night in those conditions. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the agencies that responded in addition to DC Fire and EMS and the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. Montgomery County Fire Department, the Prince George's County Fire Department, the Charles County Fire Department, the Baltimore County Police Department, the Anne Arundel County Fire Department, the Alexandria Fire Department, the Arlington County Fire Department, the Fairfax Fire Department, the Prince William Fire Department, the Baltimore City Police Department, the Maryland State Police, the Maryland Natural Resources Police, the Department of Defense, the Joint Base in Bowling Fire Department and the staff there, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Coast Guard, the United States Park Police, the Metropolitan Police Department, the FBI, and the NTSB. Despite all those efforts, we are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident. And we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter. The District Office of the Medical Examiner has lead on reuniting these bodies and these people with their loved ones, and we will continue to work to find all the bodies and collect them and reunite them with their loved ones. We should also acknowledge that the Virginia Medical Examiner and the Army Medical Examiner are involved in this operation and a very important part of getting the people identified. So.
Our hearts are certainly with all of the crew in American Airlines, and we'll hear from CEO Isom.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. I'm Robert Isom, the CEO of American Airlines. I want to express my sincere condolences for the accident that happened at DCA last night. We're absolutely heartbroken for the family and loved ones of the passengers and crew members, and also for those that were on the military aircraft. Our focus right now is doing everything that we can to support all of those involved and also the PSA Airlines team. This is devastating. We are all hurting incredibly. We urge any family and friends looking for information about their loved ones to call our designated helpline, and that's at 1-800-679-8215, 1-800-679-8215. And here's what I can share at this early stage. American Eagle Flight 5342, operated by PSA Airlines, traveling from Wichita, Kansas to Reagan National Airport, was involved in an accident just before 9 p.m. local time on final approach into Reagan National. It collided with a military aircraft on an otherwise normal approach. And at this time, we don't know why the military aircraft came into the path of the PSA aircraft. Flight 5342, a CRJ 700, was under the command of 4 crew members. They carried 60 passengers, as you know, for a total of 64 people on board. In addition to local resources already here in D.C., American Airlines has activated our care team, and that's a group of specialists that are trained to support these types of responses. These team members are on site or arriving soon. And additionally, we have members of our GO team that are on ground here in D.C., and they're being deployed with resources to do everything that we can to take care of the needs of the families and the loved ones of the passengers and crew members. And that is our sole focus. And we're so grateful for the first responders. They've been working through the night, courageous efforts. And we're actively working with local, state, and federal authorities on emergency response efforts and closely coordinating with PSA Airlines as they cooperate fully with the NTSB on the investigation. I know that there are many questions at this early stage, I just won't be able to answer many, but we'll provide additional information as it.
Authority CEO Jack Potter. The authority manages Reagan Washington National and Dulles International.
Good morning and thank you, Mayor. First, let me begin by expressing our condolences for all the victims of this flight and for their families. There's a lot of grieving going on, and so we're very sympathetic to that. I want to echo what was said about the first responders. When there's a problem in this area, everybody drops everything and they rush to wherever the problem is. So I want to thank the chief, the entire team from Washington, D.C., but just as important, the list of folks that the chief described. The federal authorities have been here en masse, and so a lot of effort was brought to bear. Unfortunately, we weren't able to rescue anyone, but we are in the recovery mode right now, and I just want to last night I expressed the fact that we hope to open at 11 o'clock today, and that is still the case. We're going to open the airport at 11 o'clock. And again, condolences to the families, and thanks to the many, many who are still out there working very, very hard to complete this recovery. Thank you, ma'am.
I do want to acknowledge that the Virginia Transportation Secretary is here, in addition to the Alexandria Mayor, and I will like to ask members of the Virginia congressional delegation to the podium next. U.S. Senator Mark Warner, followed by Tim Kaine and Representative Don Beyer.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to join with everyone else and express my condolences for the victims. For folks who don't live in the DMV, we are made up of a lot of jurisdictions. Reagan Airport's in Virginia. Across the river we have Maryland, obviously the district, but as been indicated by the chief, when tragedy happens, all those distinctions between the various jurisdictions and our federal partners all disappear. And I want to again thank all the first responders. On a personal note, I'll just add that literally I now know I was coming back from the district from a dinner to my home in Old Town Alexandria. And while I did not see
OK, well, you've just been listening and watching to a press conference following that tragic incident in Washington, D.C. 64 people believed to have sadly died. They're saying there that they're switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. Unlikely that anyone has survived that tragic incident. But we're going to cross to Holminster because the former Prime Minister Tony Blair is currently speaking at the funeral of John Prescott.
One of John's most disconcerting habits was starting a conversation in the middle with no beginning preamble. "Where's who?" I said. "Don't give me that," he barked. "You know who I mean, Menzies." He lifted up the green cloth on the table. "You can come out from under there, Menzies." Menzies? Then it dawned on me. I said, "You mean Ming?" "Oh, aye, Ming, you call them." Infusing the word with several decades' worth of working-class scorn. "Yes, him." He moved back to the door. "I just want you to know," he said as he exited, "I'm not having it." John was guardian of the party's conscience, but it's important to remember he was also its educator. Our relationship would never have worked had we been two peas in different pods. John was loyal, a quality prime ministers value highly. But more than that, when the new part of New Labour had to do difficult reforms, John would insist on being part of the debate, not to obstruct, but to understand, and where persuaded, would then be persuasive. He had the most refined and intelligent intuition about what Labour must do to sustain itself in power. The Conservative Party exists, traditionally at least, to wield power and finds nothing inherently unprincipled about it. Like most progressive movements, the Labour Party and power are uncomfortable in each other's company. In its rational moments, which are too often preceded by a prolonged period of opposition, the party knows it needs power to fulfill its purpose. But it sort of distrusts power, finds it desirable but dangerous to its self-worth, will advocate change but be curiously conservative in driving it or accepting the pain, the compromises, the trade-offs, which are its natural accompaniment. This is the contradiction which John was instrumental in resolving, and in doing so created the conditions by which that government governed more than twice as long as any Labour government before it. John had the brain to make an argument and the personality to make it appealing. That personality will be forever memorialized by, of course, the punch. So the 2001 election is trundling uneventfully, I should say, towards the finishing line. Then one afternoon I get a call from Alistair. John has just thumped a voter. Oh, I say, hard? Well, he laid him out, so yes. Anyway, cue pandemonium in the media and party headquarters. The general view amongst the campaign advisers is that it's not good for the Deputy Prime Minister to whack a voter, even if provoked, even a guy with a mullet. So I agree, not with enthusiasm, to call John and ask him to say sorry. John, I begin, and I blather on for a few minutes. John interrupts me. Cut the crap, he said. You want me to apologise, don't you? Well, yes, John. Thank you for understanding. The answer's no. I'm not bloody well apologising, and that's an end of it. Classic. So I watched the film of the punch again, and I'm trying to feel outrage, and instead find myself cheering him on. That settled it. At the next morning's press conference, I decided on a line of which to this day I am inordinately proud. The media was on fire, and the first question came breathlessly demanding what I had to say about the incident. What I have to say, I said, is, John is John. What? That's it? Indignation. That's all you're saying? There isn't anything more to be said, I replied. And indeed, there wasn't. We loved John because he was John. Unique, irrepressible, irresistible, and very human. John wouldn't tolerate a hagiography. He wasn't a saint, and frankly, we would have loved him less if he had been. He could be obstinate, hot-tempered, hypersensitive to his own amour-propre, but somehow his passion for the cause would extinguish any obstinacy. His generosity of spirit cooled the temper, and his awareness of his own fragility softened the effects of any heightened sensitivity. His troubles and his epic efforts to overcome them and master them made his humanity real. I once said to him, John, I wish you liked yourself as much as I like you. So it's right that we celebrate his life's work. He played a huge part in the affairs of government. But I want to celebrate him also as a man, a good man, a man who started as my political partner and became my personal friend. And to Pauline, his life partner, as Gordon has so beautifully said, you were his rock, and the waves, no matter how fierce, never overcame you. You are an amazing person in your own right, and he knew how fortunate he was to have you at his side. And to reason, not least in these last years, as you supported him and cared for him with such love. You will miss him. We will miss him. But I hope, if John's looking down on us, and not already in deep negotiation with St. Peter over the accommodation, I hope you will see in this vast gathering today a recognition of that working-class boy from a small Welsh town who rose to the highest ranks of the land by merit, by graft, by greatness of courage and character, and he will feel deservedly at peace.
I'm going to invite the Right Honourable Angela Rayner to speak here by Philip Larkin.
Well, we've been listening to the former Prime Minister Tony Blair deliver his eulogy at the funeral of John Prescott. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner just getting up there to speak. The spiritual successor, in many ways, of John Prescott. There have been people who sort of draw comparisons between, you know, you might have the sort of the southern, privately educated Tony Blair needed that sort of working-class northern counterweight. And in some ways, is that true of the southern, privately educated Keir Starmer needing an Angela Rayner to fulfil that John Prescott role?
I think you're absolutely right, actually, yes. Keep trade unions on board, keep working-class left-wingers on board, that sort of thing. I imagine that's the idea.
Well, although I somehow doubt that Angela Rayner has two Jaguars.
No.
I think there was something aspirational about John Prescott, you know? He knew where he came from, but also knew where he was going.
OK, well, we're going to take a quick break and have a look at the weather. We'll be back in a tick.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A fine day for most of us today with plenty of sunny spells, but there will be some showers around, particularly towards the northeast of Scotland, where an area of low pressure is moving away. It continues to bring tightly packed isobars, so a strong and gusty northwest wind, along with some showery rain, particularly for Shetland and Orkney. Meanwhile, a few showers just affecting the northwest of England for a time, western Scotland, North Wales, for example. But for many, it's simply a dry day with long spells of sunshine and feeling pleasant enough, where we've got light winds in the south, 7 or 8 Celsius, colder further north, 3 or 4 in the north of Scotland, along with that gusty wind. Towards the end of the afternoon, the clouds will thicken across Northern Ireland and we'll see some light outbreaks of rain start to move into the Western Isles, but on the whole it's a clear end to the day, and as a result temperatures will fall away across central and eastern Scotland, eastern England as well. Those temperatures slipping overnight with a frost forming in places, just some patchy cloud here and there, otherwise extensive clear spells for the first part of the night at least. However, for Northern Ireland, western Scotland, soon enough areas of rain move in, and as that rain moves into the cold air across Scotland and northern England, it will be falling as hill snow, but at lower levels expect some rain. Now that's going to move into central and southeast England by the end of the night, along with a lot of low clouds, so gloomy and damp start, but brighter skies on the way for Northern Ireland in the wake of that. But it will be a wet start for the Midlands, the south and southeast of England. Some heavy rain in places, along with a blustery breeze. The rain does ease away, it pushes through, but it stays dull and gloomy across the Midlands, east and southeast England. Brighter for the north of Scotland, western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, with some decent sunshine by the end of the day.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Thursday, the 30th of January. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Tragedy in the sky, just miles away from the White House. An American Airlines flight collides mid-air into a helicopter just seconds from landing. 67 people on board as a major rescue operation underway.
Active operation that's going to last many hours as we continue to work through recovery efforts and rescue operations.
Well, hope is fading quickly. Challenging conditions, freezing cold and ice on the water are disrupting rescuers as families share their devastation and hope.
I'm just praying that somebody's pulling her out of the river right now as we speak. That's all I can pray for. I'm just praying to God.
When was the last time you spoke with her?
She texted me that they were landing in 20 minutes.
Just so terribly sad to hear that. Also coming up, a GB News exclusive as Mark White joins an immigration raid to find out just how many migrants are exploiting an EU loophole to enter Britain illegally.
What visa have you got? Work visa?
For 6 months, yeah.
6 months? Visit visa?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Right. You're not allowed to work with that, okay? So at the moment, okay, you're under arrest.
Well, just within the last few minutes, the new immigration and asylum bill has been laid before Parliament as the government sets forward plans to try to tackle illegal migration.
Labour grandees, government ministers and members of Parliament are all gathering for the funeral of former Deputy Prime Minister John Prescott. We've been live in Hullminster.
Yep.
Well, the asylum bill has dropped in the last few minutes. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, is with us. Mark, what's the government trying to do with this legislation?
Well, they want to get tough, they say, on illegal migration into the country. So, of course, we've spoken before about small boats. That's uppermost in their thinking, going after the gangs and being able to smash the criminal networks that are sending people illegally to the UK on boats, of course, but in the backs of lorries. Forging documents to allow them to come via airports and ferry ports as well into the country. So that whole industry that is worth billions of pounds, this international industry, the government wants to be able to try to smash as best they can, levels of that industry that deal directly in the hundreds of thousands of migrants who enter this country illegally. And what it will include are these counter-terror powers. We've spoken about that before, but in practice, what that will mean is, for instance, an ability to seize telephones, to look at other sort of electronic devices as well. Now, people will be thinking, well, they could do that anyway. Well, they can't. You can't seize someone's phone or equipment before they're arrested. This will give them the power to seize that, to intervene more quickly for individuals they suspect of being involved in organising immigration crime, and to get a handle on what they're doing, who is planning to get people from their own countries, the other side of the world, often right to here. So right upstream, there will be new powers to allow the authorities, including, of course, the National Crime Agency, the new Border Security Command, to try to get a handle on what is a very big and complex problem.
And, of course, we'll be able to judge the results by the numbers coming across the channel, not least, and other ways. Of course, gbnews.com/your say. We'll be bringing you more from Mark White on that very soon indeed. But it's your news headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. Our headlines: authorities in Washington, D.C. say no survivors are expected to be found after a plane and a helicopter crashed in midair over Washington's Potomac River. Search and rescue efforts have been ongoing overnight since the collision. Let's bring you some latest pictures from the US Capitol. It's just after 8 o'clock in the morning. It's been a huge effort from emergency responders, some 300 people, police, divers, and a number of ships looking for people. Now, 64 were on board that American Airlines flight. 3 soldiers were on the Black Hawk helicopter. Authorities have confirmed that 27 bodies have been recovered, 27 from the plane, 1 from the helicopter, and they have told us at a press conference in the last few minutes that they do not expect to find survivors. Cold and icy water, perhaps it is not so much of a surprise. Well, the plane was coming into land at Reagan Washington National Airport. This is the picture seconds before the collision with the helicopter, which was on a training flight. It happened at 9 o'clock local time last night, the first major US commercial air crash since 2009. The Washington, D.C. Mayor, Muriel Bowser, says their thoughts are with the families of those involved. Now let's turn to Gaza and the Middle East, where we understand all 8 of the hostages who have been held by Hamas have been released by Hamas. They have been held in Gaza for, 15 months now, since the October the 7th attacks of 2023. 3 of them were Israelis, 2 civilians and a soldier. They are now on their way to Israel. They've been released by Hamas in different parts of the Gaza Strip. And 5 Thai nationals, not part of the deal, have also been released. Plenty more on that to come as we go through the afternoon. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 1. Now, we don't believe there are any survivors. That's the devastating update we've just heard from Washington, D.C.'s fire chief.
Yes, and these images show a passenger jet with 64 people on board colliding with a US Army helicopter before crashing into the Potomac River. Local news reports are now that 30 bodies have been recovered from the river. Coast Guard, police divers and ambulance units remain at the scene. Now, posting to Truth Social, Donald Trump's own social media network, the president said this is a bad situation that looks like it should have been prevented, not good. And he went on to question why the helicopter had not moved out of the way. Now, we're going to go over to Tom, who can show us where exactly this tragic incident took place. Tom.
That's right. We're going to start with a wide image of the continental United States here. We can see that familiar coastline, New York up here, Washington, D.C. down here, just up Chesapeake Bay, and you take a left up the Potomac River. Let's zoom in now to the D.C. area, because it's this airport, actually just the other side of the Potomac River, on the Virginia side of the river. This is the airport where we're focusing all of our thoughts today, where that American Airlines jet was coming down to land and crashed with a military helicopter in the middle of the river right about here. This is an incredibly significant location. It should be one of the most secure airspaces in the world. Just very close by is here, this Pentagon-shaped building. Well, it's named for its shape. It is the Pentagon, the centre of US military intelligence, and you can see how close the Pentagon is to the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, and indeed the crash site. But it's also very close to some of the most other secure buildings in Washington, D.C. The White House is just up here, almost in a direct line of sight from where the crash happened. The White House just there. If we move across to the east of the city, you have at the end of the National Mall, that is the US Capitol, of course, where Donald Trump's inauguration took place just 2 weeks ago. And to the other end of the National Mall, well, you've got the Washington Monument in the middle there, the Lincoln Monument here. It is all very, very close to where this extraordinary crash happened. As I say, this airspace, it's close to the heart of the US military. It's close to the heart of the US government. This is the richest, most technologically developed nation on the face of the planet. How on earth did a military helicopter crash with an American Airlines passenger jet here above this river?
And that's a question, Tom, that the authorities, the President of the United States and, of course, American Airlines will want to get to the bottom of. But joining us now is GB News US correspondent, live from Washington, D.C., Stephen Edgington. Stephen, what do we know about who was on board?
Well, we know that 64 passengers were on board the American Airlines flight from Kansas. And a lot of these passengers were actually from the US skating team, figure skating team, but also from the Russian figure skating team. And we also know that 3 soldiers were aboard the Black Hawk helicopter, which crashed into the plane. As you said earlier, authorities now believe there are no survivors. It was very cold overnight here on the Potomac River, and it looks like very unlikely that people have survived this crash. They found almost 30 bodies so far in the river. Hundreds of rescue people are trying to recover bodies at the moment. And it's just a national tragedy. I think the president is incredibly angry. He already tweeted last night saying that this crash was probably preventable. And we just don't know exactly right now how this happened, how this military helicopter was able to crash into this civilian aircraft. If you live in Washington, D.C., you'll see military helicopters all the time. They're always low flying around the city, going in and out of the Pentagon, the White House, and so on. And Ronald Reagan National Airport is one of the most complex airports for pilots to land in the United States because Washington, D.C.'s skies are so secure and there's so many regulations as to where pilots are allowed to go. It looks like from initial reports that the pilot of the civilian aircraft, the American Airlines aircraft, was following regulations perfectly. He was following the air traffic control and was going in to land into the airport when this military Black Hawk helicopter, which was on a training exercise, crashed into the plane. So initially it looks like it was the fault of the military aircraft rather than the civilian aircraft. And we don't know why the Black Hawk helicopter was not aware that there was a civilian aircraft landing at Ronald Reagan National Airport at the time. So authorities are currently investigating exactly what happened. And it's just a real tragedy here in Washington, D.C.
A huge concern for people who really expect when they're flying to developed countries that flying is the safest form of transport. And yet, clearly, a passenger plane, an American Airlines plane, being knocked out of the sky in the capital city of what we should think of, really, as one of the countries that has the safest record for flying on Earth. This is going to take a knock out of the confidence of a lot of people who are thinking about flying, Stephen.
Well, Tom, you're completely right. This is a very rare occurrence. The last time that an American civilian plane crashed in the United States was 17 years ago. So this is an incredibly rare occurrence. And I think that questions are being asked about what's going on with the military training exercises in Washington, D.C. Obviously, this wasn't the fault of the aeroplane. It wasn't a fault with an engineering fault or a mechanical fault. This was some kind of human error where a military pilot was unaware that a plane was landing in this airport at that time. There are some reports that suggest that the military, the Black Hawk helicopter was aware of another plane and they were tracking that plane rather than the plane that was actually landing. And that may have caused the crash, but at this moment in time, we just don't know what had happened. It looks like President Trump, as I said, believes that this tragedy was preventable. And this is a real test of the Trump administration. This is the first few weeks of his presidency. You know, the defense secretary was just sworn in a couple of days ago. The transport secretary was sworn in last week. And this is a real challenge and a real test of these new appointees to see how they deal with this emergency.
Yes, absolutely. And Stephen, just to add to what Donald Trump had to say on his Truth Social account, he seems to be asking, well, 2 questions, really. Why didn't the helicopter see the plane and move of its own accord? And secondly, why didn't the control tower tell the helicopter what to do? He says, instead of asking if they saw the plane, it seems as though he thinks this may well be down to human error.
Yeah, well, last night was a very clear night. It was, we had clear skies in Washington, D.C. And again, some people speculating, this is just speculation, I have to stress, but there are lots of lights all over, obviously, Washington, D.C., and it's possible that the pilot of the Black Hawk helicopter confused the lights of the plane with the lights of the city. The lights on the Ronald Reagan National Airport or airstrip are very, very bright. But again, it could have been that there was some confusion over the lighting. But again, we just don't know at this point of time. It does look like this is human error. Again, as I said, this probably wasn't a mechanical problem. And I think people need to ask questions as to what happened with air traffic control, both at the Reagan National Airport and also on the military side. And why was this training exercise taking place so close to the airport? I know, as I said, lots and lots of helicopters are flying very low across Washington, D.C. all of the time for military purposes. And I think this raises questions about the safety of that, about whether that's a good idea when there's an incredibly busy airport right in the center of the city. Ronald Reagan National Airport is literally on the Potomac River. There's two airports in Washington, D.C. And that one, it's a bit like City Airport in London. You couldn't get closer to being in the center of the city. It's a couple of miles away from the White House. So it does seem kind of strange to some people that there's so many military exercises going on with Black Hawk helicopters, with other military planes, right by the Ronald Reagan National Airport, and this has obviously led to a disaster last night.
Well, Stephen, thank you very much for the very latest there, live from Washington, D.C. We'll catch up with you a little bit later in the programme.
We will indeed, but let's speak to the travel journalist Christian Woolmer for more on this. Christian, of course, this is a secondary concern, but this will be a very bad day for the American Airlines CEO. Of course, you do not expect with such a reputable airline for something like this to have happened. Do you suspect that this was probably an error on the part of the helicopter rather than the pilot of the plane?
Yes, well, the point is that they're flying by different rules. So this was a military helicopter, and helicopters have some leeway anyway, but military helicopters in particular are allowed, because they are military, to fly pretty much anywhere and use line of sight to, as well as, of course, the air traffic controllers, to ensure that they don't get involved in a collision. And so clearly, although it's impossible to say 100%, it's very likely that the mistake here came from the military pilot who went into the path of the American Airlines plane, which seemed to be on its normal flight path. But, I do think one has to not get over panicky about this. Oddly enough, it's been a very bad time for air crashes. There was the one in Kazakhstan, which was the airline shot down by Russians, and also there was the terrible crash in South Korea just in the past month or so. So it's been a particular bad phase. But when I was at the Independent as the transport correspondent, I was covering air crashes all the time. This is 25 years ago. And literally there was one a month for major kind of air crashes. And now it's such a rare thing that you're giving a lot of coverage to, a crash that is obviously in a very famous area, but nevertheless is very unusual.
Very unusual, and yet it almost feels like with a Kazakhstan airliner flying over Russia, you could sort of imagine some problems would occur in that area, in that contested region of the world above an expansionist military power. In DC, with an American Airlines flight coming from Kansas, I mean, this isn't a war-torn part of the world. This is the richest part of the world. This is the part of the world that should have the best air traffic control, the most sophisticated systems of analysis and flight paths. What might have gone wrong? I mean, how can we in the 21st century see two standard flight pattern paths collide like this?
Well, I mean, to avoid bad language, one just has to say bad things happen, sometimes. And, somebody has made an error. It is an incredibly congested airspace with two major airports and lots of military flights, as your reporter mentioned earlier. it's really not a place. I mean, he suggested this, and maybe it's right that it's not a place to practice on and have a training flight. On the other hand, if you're going to train people, you've got to train them in difficult conditions as well. Very oddly, there was a crash 40 years ago, I think in 1982, into the very same river, and that was caused by a pilot error and icing on the wings. But that also ended up in that almost the same spot. It hit a bridge and ended up in the river. So I suppose it's likely to have more crashes in that area because it's so heavily used by aircraft, both military and passenger.
Yeah, that 1982 crash was very similar in terms of the scale of the accident. I believe about 70-odd people died in that horrific incident. Christian, thank you so much for joining us. Christian Walmer, travel journalist. So there you go. I mean, I just can't understand how the helicopter wouldn't have been... I mean, well, I know about aviation, but I mean, it just seems so out of the ordinary.
It really does. Well, we should say that in the last few minutes, it's been confirmed that the Bishop of Liverpool, John Perumbalath, has resigned. He had been facing calls to go from several senior church leaders after two women accused him of sexual harassment between 2019 and 2021, allegations he himself has consistently denied. Well, we're going to bring you much more on that story as we get it.
Yes, we will indeed. This is Good Afternoon Britain. Lots more coming up on today's show. More on that breaking news, but also GB News exclusive with Mark White. He joins an immigration raid to find out just how many migrants are exploiting an EU loophole to enter Britain. We're also going to find out more about Labour's new bill on immigration and an asylum. Will it make a difference?
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Well, you know I like an auction.
Yes.
And I've bought some strange things at auction before you have as well, haven't you, Eamon?
Yeah, well, Ellie would throw this in the bin that you're coming up with now.
How about this? Admiral Lord Nelson's hair.
Nice.
Cut. I mean, is this a bit spooky? Cut as he lay dying during the Battle of Trafalgar, so someone's gone, oh, we'll just have a little bit of that there. In 1805, is on sale in Jersey, and it's a little cup. How much would you pay for the hair?
No, nothing. It would go in the bin, straight in the bin.
What? Even what? Nelson? That's very disrespectful to the British culture and heritage.
I think it's disrespectful that he lay there dying and someone thought, we'll take a quick stick.
Well, maybe they just had. Maybe they thought, you know, because there's obviously the famous painting, isn't there, of the Battle of Trafalgar? Maybe they thought we'll give him a quick haircut, and then they kept their £15,000, 15 grand.
Where's the hair come from? What part of the body?
His head, Eamon.
Well, it could be his underarm. I don't know. You know, it depends.
All right, let me have a little look.
You would bid
it's very
more.
curly. I think it's his. I think it's his head. It's his head. What?
You would bid more for his head than say his underarm.
Well, I think so. Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah.
Or anywhere else.
I would hope so. A little less whiffy there, the head hair. And there it is. And it's in a little pot.
No.
And the only way you can probably find out is if you DNA test it, I guess. It's definitely his.
Whoever pays for that is bonkers.
Well,
that's creepy.
I was
really
seriously tempted to make a bid for a toupee, not for me, but as worn by John Wayne.
John Wayne's wig?
Yeah.
Why?
Wow.
Why?
Well, why I didn't get it was my wife said to me, that is not coming into the house.
Well, she's right. She's right.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It's 1:25. Now, GB News can reveal today that increasing numbers of EU nationals are abusing the common travel arrangement with Ireland to enter the UK and to work here illegally.
Well, many Romanians and Bulgarians in particular are avoiding the border checks from by crossing from the Republic, with others simply arriving on tourist visas and then finding work.
Well, our Home Security editor Mark White was given exclusive access to accompany immigration enforcement teams who have increased the number of raids they carry out by a third, apparently, since Labour came to power.
Under the cover of darkness, immigration officers and police move into this large agricultural business in North Wales.
No one up there? No, I haven't been touched.
They're on the hunt for immigrants working here illegally. And it doesn't take long to find their first suspect.
On you now.
The man they've detained is a Romanian national.
What's your permission to be in the UK? You got a visa to come to the UK?
For several years after Brexit, EU citizens enjoyed a grace period when authorities didn't prosecute those working here unlawfully. But now, if they breach the rules, they're treated like any other illegal immigrant.
What visa have you got? Work visa?
For 6 months, yeah.
6 months? Visit visa?
Yes.
OK. Right. You're not allowed to work with that, OK? So at the moment, OK, you're under arrest, OK? For breaching the conditions of your leave to remain in the UK. Do you understand?
As fellow officers search for other suspects, the Romanian has walked back to his accommodation on the site for further checks.
Anybody else in your caravan?
Inside a cluster of caravans, more suspects, all Romanian, are being questioned.
Where is your passport?
Officers told me they see very significant numbers of Romanians and Bulgarians in particular abusing UK immigration rules to work here illegally. An increasingly popular means of arrival is through the common travel arrangement with Ireland, and some of those detained here may well have come through that route.
We've got individuals that we've got a trace of them exiting the country. We've got no trace of them coming into the country. So we haven't bottomed that out yet, but what we found in the past is that they will have come through Ireland and then through the common travel area, you know, avoiding the controls.
In nearby offices, another group of Romanians are being questioned. Although the Home Office was unable to provide us with a detailed breakdown of the number of EU nationals arrested on immigration offences over the past year, this enforcement team told me it's definitely on the rise, and many are coming through Ireland.
Not just the EEA nationals that are going through Ireland, it's other foreign nationals, because it can be like the back door into the UK. So you've got the small boats where people are coming in illegally. You've got other clandestine that come in the back of lorry, but obviously there's the abuse of the CTA as well.
Many others are simply arriving on tourist visas and then finding employment in breach of the law. As officers question the suspects with the help of interpreters over the phone, it quickly becomes apparent why some are willing to take the risk.
OK, so how much do you get paid?
1,000 a week.
£1,000 per week.
For those employing illegal workers, these enforcement raids can be very costly indeed, with fines of up to £45,000 per illegal worker. Yet right across the country, thousands of employers continue to flout the law. Since Labour came to power, immigration enforcement raids have increased by more than a third over the same period the year before. But despite more than 3,000 arrests over the past 6 months, it's still only a tiny fraction of the number of illegal immigrants here, with unofficial estimates putting that figure at more than 1.5 million. Mark White, GB News, North Wales.
And we have Mark White here to tell us more. I guess the next question is, will they be deported?
Well, Many will go of their own volition, having been caught, but that will not preclude them, of course, from returning again a week or a month later, as many often do. So, yes, quite a few of
really,
those.
A lot of them go back, then just hop on another plane as they can to Ireland,
it has to be
starts again.
It has to be said there's also a percentage of those who are caught working illegally and living illegally in the country who then go on to try to claim asylum. And when they do that, that clearly means that there's a long drawn-out process and they end up potentially still here for not 6 months, but sometimes a year or two, even longer, some of them. So, yes, it's frustrating. There's no doubt about it. But the one thing we can say with honesty about the Labour government since they took power is that they have actually upped the enforcement activity against these illegal workers here. 30%, 32% rise over the same period last year under the Conservatives, and more than 3,000 arrests.
What the Conservatives say, though, is that illegal border crossings are up by 30%. So it's almost no surprise that raids are up by 30%. When people arriving illegally are up by 30%.
Yeah, that's true, but then the flip side of that is the first 6 months of those record arrivals, or at least that increased number of arrivals last year compared to the year before, was under the Conservatives' watch. So they've got to take ownership of that as well.
And is this new border bill that we're hearing about today, this Labour's new border bill that's intended to crack down on things like this and illegal migration, smash those gangs, what do we know about it, and is it going to have an impact?
Well, it might, but it's going to be extraordinarily difficult, there's no doubt. This is a multi-billion-pound industry, the people smuggling industry, much like the drugs trade is. They are expert at being able to get their supply lines to advertise for who they want in their own source countries, that want to make that journey to the likes of the UK. So it's very difficult to try to get an in and disrupt them. But that bill is now being laid just in the last hour before Parliament. It's giving a bit more detail about the kind of counter-terror powers that the government wants to use. And it's really effectively about intervening more quickly, even if those who are suspected of being involved in people smuggling haven't yet been arrested. There will be powers there to seize phones, to intervene, to try to determine what those individuals might be doing in planning or assisting this kind of a trade in illegal migrants. And it's not just those coming, of course, on boats across the English Channel. It's those in the backs of lorries, as we saw from the report there as well. It's others who are coming in by plane and by train and by ferry, sometimes having their documents forged by these people smugglers as well.
A multi-pronged effort. Mark White, thanks very much for joining us here live in the studio.
OK, well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Indeed, we'll be bringing you more on the Bishop of Liverpool, who's gone into quiet retirement amid quite a few accusations and allegations of sexual harassment. Also, the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, has accused the opposition, his opposition parties, of making an unforgivable mistake after they received the support of the Alternative for Deutschland party to pass plans to restrict migration. There's even talk of some of the mainstream parties teaming up together to ban the Alternative for Deutschland party altogether. That's after the news.
Very good afternoon to you. It is coming up to 25 to 2. Let's get you up to date with the headlines. Authorities in Washington, D.C. say they do not expect to find any survivors following the collision of a passenger plane and a US helicopter, with both aircraft plunging into the Potomac River. Live shots here from the US Capitol. It is, 8:30 in the morning. There, emergency responders are still on the scene searching for survivors. 64 people in total on the American Airlines flight. A further 3 soldiers on board the Black Hawk helicopter. Now, authorities have told us that at least 28 bodies have been recovered. That's 27 from the plane, 1 from the helicopter. And a short time ago, Reagan Airport Fire Chief Richard Bonnet gave this update.
Despite all those efforts, we are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident. And we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter. The district office of the medical examiner has lead on reuniting these bodies and these people with their loved ones, and we will continue to work to find all the bodies and collect them and reunite them with their loved ones.
3 Israeli hostages and 5 Thai nationals held in Gaza have been released by Hamas, and they are now back in Israel. The first to be freed was the 20-year-old Agam Berger, a female Israeli soldier. This took place in Jabalia in northern Gaza. She was handed over to the Red Cross, surrounded by Hamas fighters, as you can see, before being transferred to the border and the Israeli military. And a short time ago, the Israeli military confirmed that those other 7 hostages have been handed over, including civilians Arbel Yehud and Gadi Moses, he's an 80-year-old man, and also 5 unnamed Thai nationals. Their release not part of the official ceasefire deal. That is unilateral from Hamas. So those pictures from Jabalia in the north, however, there were chaotic scenes in southern Gaza earlier for the handing over of Arbel Yehud and Gadi Moses. Now, they were surrounded. It's understood they were shouted at and received some abuse from those crowds. They were safely released, but on the strength of that, Israel has suspended the release of Palestinian prisoners that was planned for today following those scenes. That's according to multiple reports in Israel. Reuters is saying that buses that had been due to carry Palestinian detainees from prison back to the West Bank have now been told that will not happen, certainly not in the next couple of hours. Under the deal, 110 Palestinian prisoners were due to be released. So we will have to wait and see whether that does take place indeed today or not. That's the latest from the GB newsroom. I'll be back with more in just under half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Office for GB News. A fine day for most of us today with plenty of sunny spells, but there will be some showers around, particularly towards the northeast of Scotland, where an area of low pressure is moving away. It continues to bring tightly packed isobars, so a strong and gusty northwest wind, along with some showery rain, particularly for Shetland and Orkney. Meanwhile, a few showers just affecting the northwest of England for a time, western Scotland, North Wales, for example. But for many, it's simply a dry day with long spells of sunshine and feeling pleasant enough, where we've got light winds in the south, 7 or 8 Celsius, colder further north, 3 or 4 in the north of Scotland, along with that gusty wind. Towards the end of the afternoon, the clouds will thicken across Northern Ireland and we'll see some light outbreaks of rain start to move into the Western Isles, but on the whole it's a clear end to the day, and as a result temperatures will fall away across central and eastern Scotland, eastern England as well. Those temperatures slipping overnight with a frost forming in places, just some patchy cloud here and there, otherwise extensive clear spells for the first part of the night at least. However, for Northern Ireland, western Scotland, soon enough areas of rain move in, and as that rain moves into the cold air across Scotland and northern England, it will be falling as hill snow, but at lower levels expect some rain. Now that's going to move into central and southeast England by the end of the night, along with a lot of low clouds, so gloomy and damp start, but brighter skies on the way for Northern Ireland in the wake of that. But it will be a wet start for the Midlands, the south and southeast of England. Some heavy rain in places, along with a blustery breeze. The rain does ease away, it pushes through, but it stays dull and gloomy across the Midlands, east and southeast England. Brighter for the north of Scotland, western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, with some decent sunshine by the end of the day.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. Buses replaced ScotRail train services between Girvan and Stranraer after the storms in County Down. The A51 remains closed each way along Tandragee Road in Guildford after a tree fell across the road on Friday in the storms. Now on the M6 in Greater Manchester, 2 lanes are closed southbound for emergency repairs between junctions 26 and 25 from the M58 to Bryn. In Gwynedd, the A487 is closed in both directions southwest of Bangor after an accident between the Evelyn Helly roundabout and the A55 at Park Menai. sky causing queues. In Rutland, the A606 is closed each way at Langham after an accident. In Herefordshire, the A438 is closed each way after an accident between Barter Street and Upper Dormington. In Surrey, the A25 is closed each way along Bletchingley Road in Nutfield after an accident. And Gatwick Express train services remain suspended between Gatwick Airport and Brighton because of a landslip.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 20 to 2. And German opposition parties have teamed up to pass a motion to restrict migration into the Federal Republic. The Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, has accused the opposition of making an unforgivable mistake, breaking the long-standing convention that no mainstream party would work with the radical Alternative for Deutschland party.
Yes, with the German election just a few weeks away, have the Christian Democrats taken the wind out of the AfD's sails, or have they broken a taboo and legitimised what Scholz calls the far right?
Well, let's cross to Berlin now and speak to the editor-in-chief of News, Julian Reichelt. Julian, this is a huge controversy in Germany, not least because the parliament is now in favour of restricting migration, but because it took the Merkel's party and the AfD to work together. That's a controversial step.
It is controversial in political circles. Obviously, this whole town, the whole political bubble, has been obsessed with what they call, in German, the Brandmauer, the firewall, it would be translated, that basically says you cannot put any motion into parliament that would get the votes of the AfD, the far-right party, the Alternative for Deutschland. Obviously, that was a brilliant mechanism of power for the left parties because the conservative CDU was never able to bring any law, anything into law, any motion into parliament because of that political concept that was put on them by the left. So now that concept is gone, the firewall is gone, the left is furious. Not so much because they fear anything like a Fourth Reich or, the rise of a new Nazi Germany, but because they see the collapse of their power coming, because there will be, after the next election held on February 23rd here in Germany, roughly a 55-60% majority center-right. So no way the left will play any political role. And they wanted to prevent the CDU to get into power without them with that mechanism. And that was very stable until a few days ago, until we had the next horrific crime by someone who should have never been in Germany, an Afghan, who was due to be deported, wasn't deported, then killed a 2-year-old child with a knife, stabbing the kid into the throat, killing another bystander who came to help. That changed everything. The Conservatives said, we're not going to listen to the left anymore. We're going to bring into parliament what's right. We have to restrict migration. It just cannot continue like that. They got the votes yesterday. There will be a next vote tomorrow, which will be very exciting. So lots going on.
Yeah, and Julian, as you say, there may be a lot of politicians who care about the optics of working with the AfD, and that's their primary concern. But I'm sure for a lot of Germans, they're absolutely delighted that immigration is up the agenda and that whoever's working to curb or put some more restrictions in place, they don't really mind as long as it happens.
In the age of Trump, day 10 into the era of his big pen, demonstrating people that you can make things happen, that you can solve problems. People in Germany are watching that and say, solve our main problem, and that is migration. 66% of Germans are in line with the plan of the conservative leader and candidate for Chancellor, Friedrich Merz. They want this.
But very quickly, Julian, will this raise the support of the CDU, or will it legitimise the AfD? Will it mean the AfD actually get more votes because they're seen as more respectable?
I believe it will give both of them a push. If the Conservatives, if the CDU sticks with what they're doing now, and Friedrich Merz, the leader, is kind of a shaky political figure. Sometimes he likes to backtrack on the strong rhetoric that he has delivered. So far, he's standing firm. If he does that, he will gain by that. Also, the Alternative for Deutschland will also gain because this is their program that he is now executing. So I see, the potential of 2 points up for them. CDU will remain in the lead. But if the CDU collapses now and withdraws that agenda, that new anti-migration agenda, that has huge agreement in Germany. If they move back from that, then there's a true chance that the AfD, even the elections, will even, pass by them and win that election. So, the CDU finally, after 10 years of failed Merkel policies, is doing what is right. I believe that is a good thing.
It's absolutely fascinating to see the direction that Germany's going in. Julian Reichelt, thank you very much indeed, Editor-in-Chief of the NIUS. I think it's just as simple as a lot of Germans are fed up with the sky-high levels of immigration, and there have been some horrific incidents in Germany, terror attacks and the like, and they probably don't care who gets it done. As long as it, yes, I know the AfD is a controversial party, but perhaps they like the idea that parties will just put those differences aside and just work together when it comes to something as important as border control.
But shall we look elsewhere to Europe now? Probably not Germany, but we'll look at the weather across the European continent, just in case you want to get some of that winter sun. Here's your forecast for top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Strong winds across the Canary Islands, also some wet and windy weather for the Balearic Islands, but largely settled elsewhere across eastern parts of the Mediterranean, particularly for Greece and parts of Italy. But as we move our way westwards, this is where we'll find the unsettled weather, so some heavy showers, also some strong winds at times. But further west, largely settled as high pressure dominates, but that is going to bring in some strong winds at times across Madeira and also Tenerife. But that's where we'll see the best of the temperatures, and also largely settled as we head towards the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Over 25 years ago, our next guest missed the taste of home and started making sushi with local ingredients.
Yes, Tomino Davies went on to establish Tomino Sushi Party, inspired by her mother's dedication to cooking fresh meals every day.
Now, while sushi is usually enjoyed in restaurants in Japan, Tomino is showing that anyone can create it at home. So here we go. She's already taught over 500 people and is now bringing her passion to even more people.
So she joins us now in the studio to give us one of her sushi masterclasses. First of all, we're a little bit nervous. We're certainly not pros. I love eating sushi, but certainly not making it.
As long as you follow my instruction, it should be that easy.
OK, great. That's what we like to hear.
So tell us a little bit about your business and why we're here today.
Of course. So my name is Tomino Davies. I'm originally from the place called Kochi, as you mentioned, and I'm the founder and the owner of Tomino Sushi Party. So we bring authentic, hands-on sushi making classes to homes, offices in London and home counties. Also, we run public classes, the information which you can find on my website. Yep. So this goes all the way back in 90s, actually, when I was a student.
Never.
The Japanese food wasn't widely available, but I really craved a beautiful, aromatic aged sushi, Japanese food. And when you're craving something, you started making your own at home. And I fell in love with the Englishman. He brought me back to UK. Then that's the time more people start asking me, can you teach me how to make sushi?
The People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's now 1:50, and it is 60 years to the day since Sir Winston Churchill was laid to rest.
Yes, the wartime Prime Minister was given the largest state funeral in history at the time. Sir Winston led Britain to victory over Nazi Germany, earning the love of his nation, although, of course, he lost the immediate election afterwards. But he was back in 1951. Will Hollis has the story.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight.
Winston Churchill's long life took him across continents as a soldier and into the highest office as Prime Minister. The trial of leading the nation during the Second World War cemented his place in history. Despite a life of heavy drinking and smoking, he lived to age 90, dying January 24th, 1965. But the planning for his death started a decade earlier when Sir Winston suffered his first stroke. Codenamed Operation Hope Not, the Queen ordered a funeral in scale befitting his position in history. 60 years have passed since.
It was clear that the death of Sir Winston Churchill was going to be a major national and international event.
At Churchill College at the University of Cambridge, archivists keep the personal papers of his life and death. Alan Packwood is director of the Churchill Archives Centre.
So here we have one document from those files. It's marked confidential and it documents the procedure to be followed on the death of Sir Winston Churchill. The initial action is that on his death, his private secretary, Anthony Montagu Brown, is to immediately inform the Prime Minister's private secretary. The Prime Minister's private secretary then has to tell the Queen's private secretary, the Cabinet Office and the Chief Whip's private secretary, and then a pre-arranged statement is to be supplied to the Prime Minister for him to issue.
After 3 days lying in state, Churchill's body was taken along the Thames and through the streets of London in military procession. It was the biggest state funeral in history at the time, watched around the world by millions. John Maitland Hudson was just 20 years old. 6 feet tall, the able seaman was one of the lucky few to get a role holding the rear gun carriage carrying Churchill's coffin.
It was a great honour. The streets were absolutely thronging with onlookers. They climbed lampposts, they hung out of windows. It was evident that we had a terrific responsibility and there was a great deal of pressure.
In life, Winston Churchill earned the respect and love of his nation. In death, he's remembered with equally high esteem.
He's probably one of the greatest prime ministers this country's had.
I think he did really well, obviously. Not an easy job.
Pity we haven't got him now.
Back at the Archives Centre, Alan says Churchill will stand out across history.
He's become this iconic figure.
In life, Sir Winston led Britain to victory in the darkest days of the Second World War. His light in death still shining.
"This is your victory," he said to them, and those words will long be remembered by those who heard them spoken.
Will Hollis, GB News.
Well, let's get some more now with pallbearer at Winston Churchill's funeral, John Maitland Hudson. John, thanks so much for being with us. I'm fascinated. How did you get to be a pallbearer at such a significant state occasion?
Well, I wasn't a pallbearer, I was in the rear drag ropes crew, but I just happened to be stationed at the time at HMS Excellent, which is the ceremonial headquarters of the Navy, as a young able seaman. And I was over 6 foot. That's what qualified me.
Oh, so you just had to be over 6 foot and in the right place at the right time. John,
Exactly.
Please tell us, what was it like that day? You must have been nervous at such an occasion, or did you take it all in your stride?
It's not a question of taking it in your stride. And in the Navy, we had plenty of time to train. So it was just exercising the training that we'd already undertaken. And if you see it there on the screen, it was impeccable. And we were very confident in our roles. There were no mistakes.
Now, famously, the docking cranes bowed their heads, they dipped, they nodded for the procession. The streets seemed incredibly full. This was a significant state occasion, perhaps the most significant funeral of the 20th century.
And I think even though we were young callow sailors, we were aware of the the enormous nature of the spectacle we were involved with. Let's face it, it was the biggest ceremonial occasion for a generation, and we were painfully aware of that.
And Winston Churchill, as a leader, do you look back on him fondly?
Yes, he was the man of the hour, wasn't he? He was what we needed to carry us through the darkest of times. Yes, but he was a flawed man, like many great statesmen. Having used that word, he was the greatest statesman I think we've seen in several generations.
And it's so significant. I was over in Washington, D.C. just in December. Winston Churchill is one of the only two non-Americans to have a statue in the US Capitol. His bust is now back in the Oval Office in the White House. I mean, his figure looms large, not just over Britain, but over many countries around the world.
Indeed. I mean, he was a man of enormous stature. And even young people. I remember on the day when we were had the honour of carrying his body to its resting place, the crowds that lined the streets were of all ages and of all nationalities.
Absolutely. John Maitland-Hudson, thank you so much. You're a pallbearer at Winston Churchill's funeral. Thank you very much indeed. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up in today's show, so don't move an inch. We're going to take a quick look at the weather, though.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Thursday, the 30th of January. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Tragedy in the sky. Just miles from the White House, an American Airlines flight collides mid-air into a helicopter just seconds from landing. 67 people on board as a major rescue operation is underway.
Active operation that's going to last many hours as we continue to work through recovery efforts and rescue operations.
Hope is fading quickly. Challenging conditions and freezing cold are disrupting rescuers as families share their devastation and still a little hope.
I'm just praying that somebody's pulling her out of the river right now as we speak. That's all I can pray for. I'm just praying to God.
When was the last time you spoke with her?
She texted me that they were landing in 20 minutes.
Also this hour, a Mark White exclusive. Mark White joins an immigration raid to find out how many migrants are exploiting an EU loophole to enter Britain.
What visa have you got? Work visa?
So 6 months, yeah.
6 months? Visit visa?
Yes.
Okay, right. You're not allowed to work with that, okay? So at the moment, okay, you're under arrest.
Well, this afternoon, the government has laid its immigration and asylum bill before Parliament. Ministers believe the new powers it offers will help them smash the trade in illegal immigration.
And in other news, the Church of England loses yet another senior clergyman as the Bishop of Liverpool resigns following accusations of sexual assault and harassment.
Well, of course, much to cover this hour, but in the last hour or so, new migration control legislation has been laid before the House of Commons by the government. It seeks to clamp down particularly on what the government calls irregular migration, or what you and I might call illegal migration.
Yes, I mean, if you look across the pond to the United States, Donald Trump has very much made illegal migration his priority number one, hasn't he? And he is looking fierce, I imagine. Our European leaders are looking to him thinking, maybe we should try some of those tactics. You know, round people up, get them onto a plane straight out of the United States.
Well, the Labour...
That's that. Are Labour going to follow?
The government does say, I mean, these sort of deportation flights are up by 30%. 32%, I think, was the figure the government was touting today.
Which sounds quite good, to be fair. To be fair to Labour, that does sound good. 32% increase on the same time last year.
But illegal arrivals across the Channel are also up by 30%. So, yes, more illegal people coming into the country, more deportation flights of those who arrived illegally out of the country.
I mean, and then you add that to the headlines this week about how much we're paying for basic essentials for illegal migrants who are staying in hotels, whether it's phones, whether it's clothing, whether it's shoes, God knows what else. Just the cost of this to everyone who's paying taxes in this country, who are British citizens who do everything by the book in this country, it's just getting ridiculous. So fingers crossed, I mean, I'm not holding out too much hope that this is going to fix the entire issue.
Yeah.
But a little bit more strength of action might be nice.
Well, the Tories are already saying it has one fatal flaw. Whilst there's lots of different sort of twiddles around the edges, there's no deterrent. And that, to the Conservative benches, is the fatal flaw in this plan. But what do you think? Send your comments and views by visiting gbnews.com/your say. All that to come after your very latest news headlines.
Good afternoon to you. Let's get you up to date with our top stories. Authorities in Washington, D.C. say they don't expect to find any survivors after a plane and a helicopter collided in midair over Washington, D.C.'s Potomac River. These are the latest shots from the U.S. Capitol. It's just after 9 a.m. there. Emergency responders have been on the scene all night looking for survivors. More than 300 people part of that rescue effort. 64 were on board the American Airlines flight, including crew. 3 soldiers were on the Black Hawk helicopter, and reports suggest that at least 28 bodies have already been recovered. We can show you the plane coming into land last night at Reagan Washington National Airport. This was seconds before the collision with the helicopter, which was on a training flight. Just before 9 p.m. local time is when the crash took place, the first major US commercial air accident since 2009. 3 Israeli hostages and 5 Thai nationals held in Gaza have now been released by Hamas. They are back in Israel. It began early this morning with the 20-year-old Agam Berger, a female soldier who was handed over to the Red Cross in Jabalia in northern Gaza before being transferred to the IDF at the border. And a short time ago, the Israeli military confirmed that a further 7 hostages have been handed over to the Red Cross. They are now in Israel, and that includes the civilians, Gadi Moses and Arbel Yehud, along with 5 Thai nationals. Their release not part of the official ceasefire deal. However, Israel has suspended the release of Palestinian prisoners following these chaotic scenes in Han Yunis, that's in southern Gaza, for the release of Arbel Yehud and Gadi Moses, plus those 5 Thai nationals. They were surrounded by Hamas fighters before being handed over to the Red Cross. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, his office says the delay will be in place until, quote, the safe exit of our hostages is guaranteed in the next few days. Israel is demanding the mediators achieve this. And so there is, the prison, that's Ofer prison in the West Bank, where Palestinian prisoners should have been released. 110 of them to be freed as part of the exchange deal from Israeli jails, but that appears to be on hold. Water bills are set to rise in England and Wales by an average of £123 per household from April. It means a typical bill will rise by 26% from £480 per year to £603. The industry body, Water UK, says extra money will help fund infrastructure projects and provide help for struggling customers. But there are warnings from consumer groups that it means more households will fall into debt. Now, fewer than half of parents asked, 44% in fact, in a survey, believe children should know how to use books correctly before starting primary school, with some children were instead seen trying to swipe as if using a tablet. Only 3 in 4 parents think children should be toilet trained before starting school. That's according to a poll for early years by the charity Kindred Squared. It found teachers believe that children entering primary school have delays in basic motor skills and a lack of core strength because of excessive screen time. And the survey found a huge disparity between when teachers believe children to be ready and parents think that's the case. Finally, Donald Trump says he has signed an executive order to set up a migrant detention facility at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. The US president says up to 30,000 migrants who cannot be returned to their home countries will be held at the notorious naval base. Mr. Trump says the centre, which would be separate from its high-security military prison, will house, in his words, the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Well, Guantanamo was set up in 2002 by the then-President George W. Bush to hold detainees in the wake of 9/11. That's it for more. For me, more in about half an hour's time.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
We don't believe there are any survivors. That's the devastating update from Washington, D.C.'s fire chief.
And these images show a passenger jet with 64 people on board colliding with a US Army helicopter before crashing into the Potomac River. Now, local news is reporting that at least 25 bodies have now been recovered from the river. I believe 27 bodies from the aeroplane and 1 from the helicopter. That's the latest. And the Coast Guard, police, divers and ambulance units remain at the scene. Now, posting to Truth Social last night, President Donald Trump said this is a bad situation that looks like it should have been prevented. Not good. He questioned why the helicopter had not moved out of the way. He also questioned why air control had not told the helicopter to move out of the way. But we're going to head over to Tom because he's at the video wall to tell us a little more about where exactly this took place.
That's right, Emily. We're going to start with the broader continental United States here, that famous coastline up from Florida to New England, New York. Here, of course, go down the coast, and here is Washington, D.C., just up Chesapeake Bay, the Potomac River coming off the side of it there. Let's zoom in to Washington, D.C. itself. And here, just on the side of the river, is the Ronald Reagan National Airport. The crash that we're talking about happened just here over the river, seconds from landing here at the airport. But this is a really crucial point, because where is this airport in relation to Washington, D.C., in relation to Virginia, Arlington? Here is the Pentagon. This, of course, the centre of the US military-industrial complex, actually the site of a very famous crash, a terrorist attack, of course, the 11th of September 2001, one of the 3 planes that crashed into American buildings, crashed into the Pentagon here. It's only a short distance from Ronald Reagan National Airport. But it's not just the Pentagon that is one of those famous sites that is ever so close to where this crash happened. No, just almost in a direct line of sight, up the Potomac River, we get to the White House. That is right here. The White House just miles down here from the airport, and of course other major sites in Washington, D.C. It's all incredibly close. Capitol Hill here, the US Capitol, where Donald Trump was inaugurated just 2 weeks ago, at the end of the National Mall that stretches really across the centre of D.C. The Washington Monument in the middle there, the statue of Abraham Lincoln, the Lincoln Monument at the end of the National Mall there. And so we can see that this crash occurred in the heart of the capital city of the richest and most technologically developed nation on the face of the earth. Huge questions will be asked, given the proximity of this crash and this airport, with this passenger American Airlines plane and this military helicopter. How close it was to the centre of the United States military, how close it was to the centre of the United States government as well. Huge questions on how on earth this could have been allowed to happen.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tom, for bringing us that crucial context to where exactly this incident took place. We're learning more about who was on board as well. It appears that there were a number of highly successful ice skaters on board from the US team, and also Russian world skating champions as well, a married couple on board that flight. We're going to catch up with our US correspondent who's in Washington, D.C., Stephen Edgington. Stephen, we heard a press conference a little bit earlier. What are the authorities looking at?
Well, the authorities are trying to figure out exactly how this happened. It looks like the communication between the pilot in the commercial aircraft, the pilot in the military helicopter, the Black Hawk, and the air traffic control was not disrupted. So it's quite an interesting development that there wasn't any kind of disruption in those mechanical communications. Obviously, something has gone wrong here. So I think we're still trying to find out exactly how this military helicopter flew into this plane as it was landing in Ronald Reagan National Airport. And obviously in the Potomac, which is right behind me, it's incredibly icy conditions. There's chunks of ice I can see in the river right now. And last night at 9 p.m, the aircraft came down. Throughout the night, hundreds of rescue workers have been trying to rescue people, trying to find people's bodies. But unfortunately, it looks like there are no survivors in this crash. And authorities, politicians here in Washington are desperately trying to figure out exactly how this happened. Already the blame game has begun. Democrats are blaming Donald Trump. The Republicans are blaming their predecessors. Obviously, Donald Trump was only inaugurated just over a week ago. So this is becoming incredibly political. And I think, for the survivors, it's really important, and for people flying into Ronald Reagan National Airport, which is an incredibly busy airport in Washington, D.C., it's vital that we know exactly what happened that led to this crash. Donald Trump tweeted last night saying that this was preventable. Other authorities are saying this is probably the case, this was preventable. We're just trying to figure out at the moment exactly how that military aircraft pilot didn't realize that there was a commercial flight landing at the airport at that time. We know that the Black Hawk was on a training exercise, and the pilot of the commercial aircraft was incredibly experienced. He had 6 years experience as a pilot. This, the aircraft company has said that this wasn't an inexperienced pilot. People aren't blaming the commercial aircraft. It looks like the blame is more on the military aircraft. But again, we just don't know exactly what happened last night.
Well, Stephen, thank you very much indeed for being there for us, and being still able to see ice in the river is extraordinary. It just gives a sense of that, of those
stunning
conditions.
view behind him.
Yeah.
Shall we speak to Matthew Capucci, who's a Washington local and actually witnessed this crash this morning? Matthew, thank you so much for speaking to us. I can't imagine what it was like to witness such an incident.
So I have to say, I didn't witness the actual collision itself. That only lasted about 3 to 5 seconds. But the aftermath and everything since, for really the past 11 hours, has been horrific to see unfold. One of the toughest things to watch was seeing all the ambulances eventually kind of drive away and thin out when it became clear this was no longer a search and rescue mission, but more a recovery mission, which we now know all 67 people involved were presumed dead. I want to give folks a bit of a sense of the geography around here too, because this is such a busy area. Behind me, you can see there's the Pentagon. That's where all the national security takes place. There is the Washington Monument, the U.S. Capitol, where the president was inaugurated just last week. And only 3 kilometers to the south, you see Reagan National Airport. Now, the Potomac River runs south to north across the area. On that side is Maryland, on this side is Virginia. The airport parallels that, and there's one main north-south runway that's about 7,000 feet long. That's the longest runway at Reagan National. The bigger planes, the 3-seat by 3-seater ones that carry folks across the country, take off and land there. But there are 2 smaller runways, each of which are about 5,000 feet long, that service the 2-by-2-seat regional jets, and that's exactly what last night's flight was landing on, runway 33 out of the southeast. Now, given the winds were out of the northwest, the flights like to land into the wind. So we know based on air traffic control, the flight was cleared to land on runway 33. About a third of all the flights last night were using that runway. So this wasn't like a different configuration. About a third of the flights were using that runway. We also know, based on air traffic control, it appears controllers asked the helicopter, do you have a visual of this CRJ, this regional jet? Proceed behind the CRJ, and that obviously didn't happen. So it raises the question, was situational awareness a factor? Did the folks in the helicopter perhaps have a visual on the wrong airplane? These are things the NTSB will be investigating down the road.
Absolutely fascinating to hear that difference between those smaller jets, bigger jets, potentially the helicopter expecting a different sort of flight path than the one that this jet was on. But as we heard from the Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy earlier today, these were standard flight patterns, both for the helicopter and for the American Airlines jet. Do we have any understanding of any more information, of any set point announcements that might happen throughout the rest of the course of today?
We don't necessarily know exactly what information will be released, but we can say, just to your point, that, you're exactly right. This was a standard pattern by the PSA, the American Airlines flight. And here's the thing. Airplanes can't stop and go, but helicopters can. And that's why, traditionally in environments like this, the helicopter has to yield to the American Airlines flight. And that was the instruction from air traffic control. I work as a meteorologist. I'm oftentimes on here doing the weather for you folks when there's some big international story. And usually when it comes to aircraft incidents, the first question is, was weather a factor? Was visibility a factor? Did someone lose situational awareness because they were in a fog bank or a cloud or visibility dropped? No, not at all. Look how good visibility is right now. This is how it was last night. Ultimately, the only way weather really played a factor was, unfortunately, to the rescuers and the folks who perished in the river, because water temperatures are only around 1 or 2 degrees Celsius, so near freezing, and there's actually ice floating down the river right now.
Matthew, you know what it's like with the internet and everything. People will speculate furiously over what could have happened, knowing that this was standard pattern, knowing that it was a clear night. It's so important that we get the answers quickly.
It really is. In environments like this, it can become the telephone game quite quickly. This episode only happened 12 hours ago, and already it is a global story. People want answers. And I think in environments like this, it's important that we allow the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Bureau, to begin combing through the data. We know that it's very likely that it was the helicopter that essentially undertook an incursion, kind of went someplace it wasn't supposed to or didn't follow air traffic control instructions or procedures. We know that's likely, but the question is why? What factors were involved? And so now they have to go through, parse the data. They have to interview sources, interview air traffic controllers, look at the exact phrasing that was used. All sorts of stuff like that, which will be very key and will take weeks, if not a little bit longer, to find out, and review footage from different angles and do something called photogrammetry, basically trying to piece together a 3D image of what happened at every moment.
Well, Matthew Capucci, thanks so much for being there for us in the bitter cold of the Washington air at the moment. They're overlooking the tragic scenes of what happened overnight.
Yeah, it's just so terribly sad. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up. Yes, a GB News exclusive. Mark White has been joining an immigration raid. He's finding out how many migrants are exploiting an EU loophole to enter Britain illegally. And also, Labour have a new bill that they're launching today in an attempt to crack down on the people smuggling gangs. That's next.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Lauren, let's start with this, shall we? How children's TV may be harming, not helping young minds.
Yeah, so this is an article in the Express today, a big double-page spread as a result of some new research in a new book that's coming out by a child psychologist, saying that children's television, and I think perhaps more importantly, the way that children consume television and video product now is perhaps not as healthy for them as we would hope it would be. And there's quite some distance from children's television of the past, of the sort of the Bagpuss and Clangers and Ivor the Engine era. And I think what's interesting about this is particularly the how children's television is consumed angle, because children are now put in front of screens significantly more often than they were, certainly when I think we were growing up. The content that they are consuming is not great for their brains and their learning and development, which Floella Benjamin of children's television fame is now leading a big crusade to say that some of this is really, really bad for children.
These days, they're not watching the TV that we all watched when we were growing up. They're not even watching GB News in the morning.
What are they thinking?
Would you believe it? But they are watching this absolute drivel all day long on YouTube, and because obviously all our TVs are now connected to the internet, or they're getting TikTok on their TV. It's not even, so they don't even necessarily have to have smartphones or iPads. They can just watch this stuff on TV, and it is rubbish. They are watching it and they're obsessed with it. Oh God, Skibbity Toilet or something. Have you heard of this?
No.
No? Well, you'll have viewers who have got who are parents of sort of 13-year-olds, and this Skibbity Toilet thing is, they're all obsessed with it, and this is a really annoying sort of theme tune or thing that they sing at you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Can you tell people?
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 2. Now, increasing numbers of EU nationals are abusing the common travel agreement the UK has with Ireland to enter the UK illegally and work, GB News can reveal.
Yes, many Romanians and Bulgarians in particular are avoiding border checks by crossing from the Republic, with others simply arriving on tourist visas and then finding work and then outstaying their visa.
Well, our Home and Security editor Mark White was given exclusive access to accompany immigration enforcement teams who've increased the number of raids they carry out by 1/3 since the new government came to power.
Under the cover of darkness, immigration officers and police move into this large agricultural business in North Wales.
No one up there? No, I haven't been touched.
They're on the hunt for immigrants working here illegally. And it doesn't take long to find their first suspect.
On you now.
The man they've detained is a Romanian national.
What's your permission to be in the UK? You got a visa to come to the UK?
For several years after Brexit, EU citizens enjoyed a grace period when authorities didn't prosecute those working here unlawfully. But now, if they breach the rules, they're treated like any other illegal immigrant.
What visa have you got? Work visa?
For 6 months, yeah.
6 months? Visit visa?
Yes.
Ah, OK. Right. You're not allowed to work with that, OK? So at the moment, OK, you're under arrest, OK? For breaching the conditions of your leave to remain in the UK. Do you understand?
As fellow officers search for other suspects, the Romanian has walked back to his accommodation on the site for further checks.
Anybody else in your caravan?
Inside a cluster of caravans, more suspects, all Romanian, are being questioned.
Where is your passport?
Officers told me they see very significant numbers of Romanians and Bulgarians in particular abusing UK immigration rules to work here illegally. An increasingly popular means of arrival is through the common travel arrangement with Ireland, and some of those detained here may well have come through that route.
We've got individuals that we've got a trace of them exiting the country. We've got no trace of them coming into the country. So we haven't bottomed that out yet, but what we found in the past is that they will have come through Ireland and then through the common travel area, you know, avoiding the controls.
In nearby offices, another group of Romanians are being questioned. Although the Home Office was unable to provide us with a detailed breakdown of the number of EU nationals arrested on immigration offences over the past year, this enforcement team told me it's definitely on the rise, and many are coming through Ireland.
Not just the EEA nationals that are going through Ireland, it's other foreign nationals, because it can be like the back door into the UK. So you've got the small boats where people are coming in illegally. You've got other clandestine that come in the back of lorry, but obviously there's the abuse of the CTA as well.
Many others are simply arriving on tourist visas and then finding employment in breach of the law. As officers question the suspects with the help of interpreters over the phone, it quickly becomes apparent why some are willing to take the risk.
OK, so how much do you get paid?
£1,000 a week.
£1,000 per week.
For those employing illegal workers, these enforcement raids can be very costly indeed, with fines of up to £45,000 per illegal worker. Yet right across the country, thousands of employers continue to flout the law. Since Labour came to power, immigration enforcement raids have increased by more than a third over the same period the year before. But despite more than 3,000 arrests over the past 6 months, it's still only a tiny fraction of the number of illegal immigrants here, with unofficial estimates putting that figure at more than 1.5 million. Mark White, GB News, North Wales.
Well, Mark White from GB News, who was in North Wales, is now in the studio here in London. Joins us now.
It was a long drive back, I have to say. And I was rather tired after that raid.
But this was exclusive access to one of these raids, and these raids have been increasing.
Yeah, they have. I mean, I guess to Labour's credit, in the 6 months or more now that they've been in power, it's up 32% on what it was under the Conservatives. That's not to say that the Conservatives hadn't also increased the level of immigration enforcement. But the truth is, despite the really good work that these immigration teams are doing, and they are all around the country, you never see them, in your daily life. They just get on and they're raiding these unscrupulous employers who are employing illegal overseas workers that are not supposed to be here. They have no right to work here. It's a drop in the ocean, as I said towards the end of the piece. The number of people here working illegally is at least 1.5 million. We don't know the true figure. So the government doesn't publish it. The government can't publish it because it's the great unknown. But we know it's a big, big issue.
I mean, as a woman, my first concern is safety, really. And if our government doesn't know who's in this country, then I don't feel particularly safe. And I know a lot of women and girls feel exactly that way. I must say that a lot of people getting in touch saying, oh, this is the low-hanging fruit. This is the easy stuff when it comes to illegal migration, you know, workers who could have previously been on seasonal worker visas and things like this. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think it is an issue, though, that has to be dealt with because, you know, you have got very significant numbers of people, and I've said 1.5 million, but there are many who believe it's much higher than that. That's 1.5 million people, at the very least, who are in this country making many hundreds of millions, billions of pounds that then does not go to the exchequer, but yet they will still be there, probably using the kind of public services that other people find it increasingly difficult to get in, you know, appointments at, the likes of doctors, the likes of potentially children at school. You know, some of these illegal workers do have some form of documentation, often it's forged, but it allows them to get some of the public services that they're not paying for because they're not in any way, shape or form.
The NHS aren't border control, so they don't ask.
Indeed.
So there you go.
But all of this fits into a political narrative, and we are seeing significant shifts in the political makeup of the United Kingdom as we speak. In the last few minutes, a new poll has been published by the company Find Out Now. They're a British Polling Council registered pollster, reputable pollster, that has now the Reform Party in first place on 27% of the vote, ahead of the Labour Party, which is on 23%, and the Tories down on 21. Mark, this is no doubt in part a response to the migration situation, both legal and illegal, that we're seeing in the country.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because it's not one rogue poll anymore, is it? We are seeing consistently poll after poll showing Reform now overtaking Labour and so well ahead of the Conservatives. Remember, just a few months back, it was big news that they'd drawn level with the Tories. Well, now they're well surpassing the Conservatives. And you're right to say that immigration, I think, is a big issue at play here, because Reform have been front and centre of trying to highlight the migration crisis in this country, not just illegal migration, but of course legal migration, which is running at 750,000, even 1 million a year, the truer figures that come out a little bit later.
Yeah, they're
after
always
the
revised
official
upwards,
figures.
aren't they? Never downwards. But GB News is rightly highlighting some of the crazy cases of foreign criminals who've come here illegally, then committed crimes, and then somehow are able to stay in this country because of their human rights or their right to a family life and things like this. And these are the sort of things that people are just absolutely sick of. So they're going to go to a party who's going to try and deal with that, I suppose, or at least say they're going to.
We'll have some more on analysis on that particular poll. The significant point here, I think,
actually,
is that given Labour on 23 in this poll and Reform are on 27, that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's 4 points ahead. I mean, normally the margin of error in a poll is 2 to 3%. Now, we have seen Reform edge ahead by sort of 1% or behind by 1% in some other pollsters, Opinium, YouGov and Techne, but this is the first time there's been a significant lead there in first place.
The biggest lead by far, isn't it?
So we will have some more on that later in the programme. But in the meantime, time's running out on your chance to become our biggest ever giveaway winner. An incredible £50,000 could be yours in your bank account. Totally tax-free. Yes, that's tax-free cash to spend however you'd like. Make sure you don't miss out.
Lines close tomorrow on your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
It's such a nice feeling. Just go for it.
It's one text, and if I can win, anyone can win.
I was on cloud 9.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it.
For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Please check luck.
Got to be in it to win it, don't you? Interested to know your thoughts at home about this poll. 27 points to Reform, 4 points ahead of the Labour Party. Very interesting indeed, let us know. We're also going to be covering the Church of England because it's lost yet another senior clergyman as the Bishop of Liverpool this time resigns following accusations of sexual assault and harassment, which he denies. That's after the news.
Good afternoon to you. Our top stories. Authorities in Washington, D.C. say they don't expect to find any survivors after a plane and a helicopter collided in midair over Washington's Potomac River. These are the latest live shots from the U.S. Capitol. It is, 9:30 in the morning there, where emergency responders have been looking for survivors. Cold and icy conditions in the U.S. Capitol. 64 people were on board the American Airlines flight. 3 soldiers on the Black Hawk helicopter. And officials have given a press conference. They've confirmed at least 28 bodies have already been recovered.
Despite all those efforts, we are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident. And we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter.
3 Israeli hostages and 5 Thai nationals held in Gaza have been released by Hamas and are now back in Israel. Agam Berger, a female soldier, was the first to be handed over to the Red Cross. These pictures from Jabalia in northern Gaza earlier this morning. She was then transferred to the border and handed over to the Israeli military. A short time ago, the IDF confirmed that 7 more hostages were also handed over, including civilians Gadi Moses and Arbel Yehud, and 5 unnamed Thai nationals. They are now safely back in Israel, according to the IDF. However, there were chaotic scenes in southern Gaza during the handing over of some of those hostages. Arbel Yehud here, a 29-year-old Israeli civilian in your picture. They were surrounded, as you can see, by armed masked Hamas fighters. And as a result, Israel has suspended the release of Palestinian prisoners following those scenes. Reuters has also reported the buses that were due to carry 110 Palestinian prisoners back to the West Bank have now been told to stand down. So that prisoner release of Palestinians has been delayed by Israel. The Bishop of Liverpool has resigned following allegations of sexual assault and harassment made against him. The Right Reverend Dr. John Perun-Balath said he had decided to retire without any admission of fault or liability to avoid becoming a distraction. It comes after Channel 4 reported one woman had accused the bishop of kissing her without consent and groping her. Another woman accused him of sexual harassment. He continues to deny any wrongdoing. And that is it for the moment. More news coming up at the top of the next hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A fine day for most of us today with plenty of sunny spells, but there will be some showers around, particularly towards the northeast of Scotland, where an area of low pressure is moving away. It continues to bring tightly packed isobars, so a strong and gusty northwest wind, along with some showery rain, particularly for Shetland and Orkney. Meanwhile, a few showers just affecting the northwest of England for a time, western Scotland, North Wales, for example. But for many, it's simply a dry day with long spells of sunshine and feeling pleasant enough where we've got light winds in the south, 7 or 8 Celsius, colder further north, 3 or 4 in the north of Scotland, along with that gusty wind. Towards the end of the afternoon, the clouds will thicken across Northern Ireland and we'll see some light outbreaks of rain start to move into the Western Isles, but on the whole it's a clear end to the day, and as a result temperatures will fall away across central and eastern Scotland, eastern England as well. Those temperatures slipping overnight with a frost forming in places, just some patchy cloud here and there, otherwise extensive clear spells for the first part of the night at least. However, for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, soon enough areas of rain move in, and as that rain moves into the cold air across Scotland and northern England, it will be falling as hill snow, but at lower levels expect some rain. Now that's going to move into central and southeast England by the end of the night, along with a lot of low clouds, so gloomy and damp start, but brighter skies on the way for Northern Ireland in the wake of that. But it will be a wet start for the Midlands, the south and southeast of England. Some heavy rain in places, along with a blustery breeze. The rain does ease away, it pushes through, but it stays dull and gloomy across the Midlands, east and southeast England. Brighter for the north of Scotland, western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, with some decent sunshine by the end of the day.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. In County Down, the A51 is closed in both directions along Tantreby Road in Guildford. It's been closed since Friday morning after the storms because of a fallen tree. In Derbyshire, the A610 is blocked where a lorry is overturned and shed a large load of stones on the roundabout outside the police headquarters at Ripley, causing delays. In Gwynedd, the A487 remains closed in both directions after an accident early this morning southwest of Bangor. It's closed between the Evelyn-Helly roundabout and the A55 at Park Menai, causing queues. In Herefordshire, the A438 is closed each way between Bartestree and Upper Dormington after an accident. In Northamptonshire, the A14 is blocked eastbound by an accident from the M1-M6 Catthorpe interchange and junction 1 at Welford, causing 3 miles of queues. And in Surrey, the A25 is closed each way along Bletchley Road in Nutfield after an accident.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon. Britain has just gone 20-3. Now, the Bishop of Liverpool has resigned following accusations of sexual harassment and sexual assault by 2 women between 2019 and 2024. Accusations that he continues to deny.
Yes, in a statement, the Right Reverend Dr. John Perumbalath said he did not want to be a distraction after claims made by 2 women were outlined in a Channel 4 News investigation. But he added his resignation was not occasioned by fault or by any admission of liability.
Well, let's get the thought now of the Vicar of Christchurch, New Malden, Stephen Kurt. Stephen, this is another day of bad press for the Church of England.
Yeah, terrible. The case itself is terrible. Our hearts have got to go out to the people affected, the survivors of this, or of this alleged, I think we have to say, abuse. But most significantly of all, yet another example of the church just handling safeguarding terribly. Every single part of it is stamped with the aspects we've got so used to, just as little being done as possible for as long as possible, being forced to respond to it when the media get hold of it, defensive, fairly petulant statements being made, most notably by the Bishop of Dover on Channel 4, I think it was yesterday. All the characteristics that make many of us despair, and there's got to be change. These will continue to come out, these cases, because people now know that they will be listened to, if not by those in authority in the church, then by those in the media and in the wider world.
Yes, because it did take a Channel 4 News investigation to precipitate this this resignation. I mean, he says that his resignation, doesn't mean that he's admitting to any of the accusations. He continues to deny them, of course, but it shouldn't have to take the media getting involved necessarily for these sorts of things to be dealt with.
And every time it happens, the church loses more credibility. If the church came out, and this is the mistake that the authorities in the church make the whole time, if they came out and they were the first ones to say, look, this has happened, we take it very seriously, people are fair-minded and people know that things like this occur, and it's the cover-up that is always the problem, and the seeming lack of transparency, and they simply never learn. And, on the transparency matter, confidentiality is always wheeled out. About 95% of the times that confidentiality is invoked in the Church of England, it's to stop transparency. And they talk about proper processes being followed. But basically, on closer examination, or fairly, cursory examination, you see that as little was done as possible for as long as possible. And they just hope to get away with it. And what they're recognising now is that's no longer going to work. It should never have worked. I mean, Stephen Cottrell should not be Archbishop of York after the way he handled the David Tudor affair. And all the same factors seem to be present here.
Well, of course, the Bishop of York's not here to defend himself, so we won't go too far down that path for now. But
no, I understand that.
It's an opinion, yeah.
Yeah, but Stephen Kurt, appreciate your time and your thoughts. And as you say, I mean, let's hope that lessons can be learnt here and something can change within the Church of England. But thanks so much for joining us, Vicar of Christchurch, New Malden.
Yes, well, in his resignation letter, John Perumbalath said the following. Earlier this week, I was approached by Channel 4 News, who informed me they would be broadcasting a story allegations of inappropriate behaviour by me against two different women. Since those allegations were made, I have consistently maintained that I have not done anything wrong and continue to do so. Since the claims were made in 2023, they have been investigated and considered by experts from the National Safeguarding Team and had found them unsubstantiated. OK, so that's what the Reverend says there.
But if you want to get away from it all, if you're in search for some winter sun to avoid the cascading waterfall of bad news, then here are your top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Strong winds across the Canary Islands, also some wet and windy weather for the Balearic Islands, but largely settled elsewhere across eastern parts of the Mediterranean, particularly for Greece and parts of Italy. But as we move our way westwards, this is where we'll find the unsettled weather, so some heavy showers, also some strong winds at times. But further west, largely settled as high pressure dominates, but that is going to bring in some strong winds at times across Madeira and also Tenerife. But that's where we'll see the best of the temperatures, and also largely settled as we head towards the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and do not move a muscle. This is the shocking new poll that shows the Reform Party in first place, many points ahead of both Labour and the Conservatives. What does this mean for our politics? That next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lately, it's getting much better. The people getting more educated in terms of overall well-being of the skin health rather than temporary aesthetic treatments. Because most of the treatments in aesthetic, it doesn't change the texture of the skin. It just gives like volumetric result or remove the wrinkles temporarily.
So what are the most popular treatments that people are after?
According to a statistic report, first is anti-wrinkle, then dermal filler, then energy-based device. Yeah. But lately, biostimulators also became very popular. And
what do you mean by biostimulators?
Biostimulator, any substance that can change the texture of the skin, or like it will lead to postpone the aging process, or proliferate more collagen, increase the elasticity of the skin, such as polynucleotide or exosome, or different vitamins and minerals in the form of mesotherapy considered as a biostimulator.
Turkey's a particularly popular destination because the costs are so much lower. There have also been a lot of horror stories about what can happen when things go wrong, even people dying from post-surgery complications. What would you advise people?
Choose as a practitioner or surgeon very carefully and never prioritize price over quality. This is your face after all, your body after all. And mistakes can be reversible. It can be irreversible. And sometimes it's not like a booking restaurant or hotel. It's a sensitive matter that can affect their confidence and skin and body for life. Yeah. So they need to choose very wisely. They need to search what kind of methodology that particular surgeon, they perform the treatments. Are they using any safety tools?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's now 10 to 3, and is the rise of the Reform Party unassailable?
Well, let's look at the latest opinion polling. This from Find Out Now. The party's risen to first place in this pollster, 4 points ahead of the Labour Party and 6 ahead of the Tories. Let's talk to Christopher Hope, our political editor, for more on this. Chris, we've seen a lot of polls where reform's been ticking up, but this one seems a bit different, the highest lead that we've seen.
That's right. Hi, Tom. Hi, Emma. Yeah, look at those numbers. 27-point increase. That is outside, for the first time, outside the margin of error for these polling. Now, Find Out Now polled 2,487 adults yesterday and the day before, yesterday, forgive me, the 29th. The polling of the margin of error is 2 to 3%. That means that these figures can be out by that much were an election called tomorrow. This gives them a 4-point lead, 1 point ahead of last week when they're on just 26 points. It means Reform UK is now ahead in the polls. There's no debate there based on what the margin of error might try and tell you. I've been looking back at the trend of Find Out Now. They are now up 5 points in 2 months since the 27th of November last year. They're on 22%, now on 27%. That's a 5-point increase. It just shows to me how momentum is with Reform UK. I think, in a sense, voters appear to be protesting against both Labour and the Tories. Labour had a chance to show they were changing. They were a new party immediately after the election. That was squandered over the summer, and Reform UK has been a beneficiary. These are people who think that neither of those two parties are working for me. I'll give Reform UK a chance. And I should say, were there an election tomorrow, Nigel Farage would have to scramble to find enough experience to form a serious cabinet. He's got 5 MPs at the moment. There's no way you look at that party and think this party could form a government were an election held tomorrow. The job of being in the opposition is to have an opposition which could slot into government. That can't be the case currently with Reform UK. So there's no election for 4 or 5 years. Where these figures take us, we'll wait and see. And it's only one poll, of course. Other polls exist that don't give Reform UK a lead at all. But right now, a 4-point lead is a moment for celebration for Nigel Farage ahead of Brexit Day tomorrow. 5 years since Brexit happened, and of course he'll be talking, I'm sure, tomorrow night at a rally.
Yeah, and support for reform is broader than for the Conservatives, certainly in terms of age, isn't it? I mean, it's very, very difficult to find someone younger than aged 40 who would vote Conservative, but when it comes to reform, they do seem to be reaching out to some of those younger voters, those key younger voters.
That's right. There's all this activity on what I call the TikTok, Emily, of course. Yeah, you're seeing here Nigel Farage do Facebook and social media posts. It goes back to his time in the jungle. I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. That introduced him to a new audience. I think he's made a lot of ground there. The Tories, of course, are nowhere on age. I think it was early 60s, the typical age you turn into a Tory voter at the last election. It appears that the young people are turning towards Farage too.
Well, we'll keep an eye on this one. It looks like the Reform Party, not just on Find Out Now, but it's also up on some other polls, although not yet in first place. We'll see if the trend continues. Chris Hope, thanks for joining us.
Fascinating shake-up of politics, eh? Well, thank you for watching Good Afternoon Britain. Do not go anywhere, because it is, of course, Martin Daubney who's up next.
Heavy
heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine day for most of us with blue skies and any showers tending to ease during the rest of the day before further spells of wet weather arrive overnight as an occluded front moves in from the Atlantic. Now ahead of that we do have a ridge of high pressure. The Northern Isles seeing low pressure nearby and a continuation of some showers, but elsewhere across Scotland an early frost and some low temperatures below freezing. Likewise for northern and eastern England ahead of the rain that's moving in. Now because of that we'll see some hill snow for a time overnight, but most of the lying snow above about 500 metres. And it's a grey, wet and cold start to the day for many of us on Friday. Northern Ireland seeing the best of any brightness first thing. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of low cloud, outbreaks of rain, some heavy downpours for a time along the south and southeast of England, and some drizzle as well as mist and fog here and there. But Northern Ireland, Western Scotland as well, Western England and Wales starting to brighten up through the morning. Sign of things to come during the rest of the day across western parts of the country. I think for central Scotland into northern and central England as well as the east of England will keep the low cloud through much of the morning, outbreaks of rain and drizzle. The heavier rain tending to ease away towards the southeast, turning drier, and in the west certainly turning brighter by the afternoon with some decent sunny spells coming through. So a pleasant afternoon for western areas, 8 to 10 Celsius with sunny spells. Not feeling quite so pleasant where we keep the low cloud across parts of the Midlands, eastern and northern England as well as central Scotland. That does tend to fizzle away into Friday night, albeit slowly. Further west we've got clear spells for a time, so a touch of frost, but further cloud and rain comes along at times through the weekend and into the start of next week.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock and welcome to the Martin and Daubney Show on GB News. And the sharp-eyed will have noticed that I'm actually Dawn Neeson, not Martin Daubney. But we are broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Packed show coming up, so you don't want to move a muscle. GB News exclusive as our man Mark White joins an immigration raid to find out how many migrants are exploiting an EU loophole to enter Britain.
What visa have you got? Work visa?
Still 6 months, yeah.
6 months? Visit visa?
Yes.
Ah, OK. Right. You're not allowed to work with that, OK? So at the moment, OK, you're under arrest.
So the ultimate question. So will Labour finally smash the gangs? Channel migrants who put lives at risk will face up to 5 years in jail under a new border security bill. But is that enough of a deterrent? GB News will be speaking with the Home Secretary very shortly. And Reform UK take the lead in a new poll. They've been ranked 4 points ahead of Labour and 6 points ahead of the Tories. So could Nigel Farage really be your next Prime Minister? And we don't believe there are any survivors. That's what US officials say after an American Airlines plane collided with a helicopter above Washington, D.C. 67 people were on board that plane. Dee, thank you for your company this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. And as you say,